Hello, I'm Sheriff Wayne Ivey. Today's parents and kids face challenges like never before. Drugs, gangs, bullying, and even social media have completely changed our ability to keep watch over our kids and hold them accountable for their actions. Today's parenting is 24 hours a day and one of the most demanding jobs in the world. As a parent of four, I know how hard it is to tough love your kid. But as a veteran of law enforcement for over 34 years, I know that going to visit your child in prison is even harder, and coming to see them here is unimaginable. Unfortunately, in today's society, those may just be the only choices you have. That's why it's important for you to have every tool possible to be your child's personal cop. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. And now it's time to be a parent again. Good morning, everybody. First of all, on behalf of all of our team, thank you for being here today. Thank you for understanding the importance of this program and what it means for the next generation of parents. As we talk to everyone across the county, the first thing that we talk about is that as a parent today, you are raising the next generation of parents. And we have to make sure that that generation is holding their kids in check, holding their kids accountable, and teaching them responsibility. And that's what this program is primarily about today. As we look over all the different things that are going on, we saw a need for this. And our crime prevention team, our community relations team, all of whom you probably had a chance to meet out in the foyer there, they are the ones that saw the need to put this together. And if you will, please give them a round of applause. Their lieutenant is Mike Scully. There was no question when we started that the title fit perfectly. It's time to be a parent again. It is absolutely time for parents to get back in charge of their child's lives. And many, we'll go through and you'll see many of us are doing it. Many of us are engaged. But what we saw is that today's world throws a whole different pitch at you, and you have to be prepared to do it. So that's what this course is about. I want to stop for just a second and thank our own personal Brevard Sheriff TV production team, Cheryl and Ray, for they're going to be recording today and actually streaming this live. And then I want to thank Pastor Linkus, his team here, his production team as well, the church, for letting us use this as a venue today. So with that, let's jump into the things that we're going to talk about. Why are we here? What brought each of you in here today? If I went through and said, why are you here? Why are you here? What would you tell me? In fact, why are you here today? All right? Absolutely. To be a better parent, to make sure our children are on the right path, education, everything else. And you'll see we find a direct correlation between when kids start to fail in school, when kids start to struggle in school, and when they start to get in trouble with us. And you'll see that as we tie it together. In fact, our Brevard Federated teachers are here. Richard Smith is with us as well, because they know the importance of this as we go. All right, so let's talk about the 5 types of parents that we know there are. There's the parent that's doing it right. There's the parent that every day is engaged in their kid's life, the parent that is making sure that they are staying on top of everything that they should be doing. There's the parent that's doing it wrong. Doesn't mean that they don't want to be engaged. Doesn't mean that they don't want to be a part of their child's life. It just means they haven't had the opportunity to embrace the skills, the skill set that it needs to be a parent in today's world. And it is a different world today, as you will see as we go through a lot of this presentation. This world today throws 100 different pitches at you, throws 100 different challenges at you, and you got to be ready to swing on any one of them. And that's what this program is about as we go through. So you got the parent that's doing it right, the parent that's doing it wrong. You got the parents that's unsure how to do it. And we have with us today our state attorney, Assistant State Attorney David Koenig, who's going to tell you, as a parent, these are the tools you can use to keep your kid in check, to hold your kid accountable. Now, there's nothing in this program that is going to tell you to whoop your kid's butt. But there's nothing here today going to tell you not to either. There is nothing here that's going to tell you how you choose to be a parent. What we're going to do today is this is a buffet. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff up on the buffet for you to walk out the door with and decide what tool you're going to use as your parent, as a parent. But I will tell you this, whatever tool you use, we want you to do it right. We want you to do it at the absolute best you can. Safety of the child, safety of the parent, everything else is always the utmost concern for us. But we want you to have the tools you need to be a parent in today's world. So we got the parent that's unsure how to do it, and then we got parents that are scared to do it. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why we're scared to do it. Some of it might be we're a single parent and we're trying to raise a 15 or 16-year-old that at times can threaten us, at times can put us back on our heels a little bit. Some of us are scared to do it because we're scared we'll hear that knock on the door where they're coming to arrest us because we've actually taken action in trying to hold our kid accountable. That's where it has to stop. All right, that's where we have to say we are going to be the parent that we know in our heart we should be to raise our kid and take them to that next level. It's not just about being threatened or intimidated or hearing the knock on the door. It's about tough love, and that's where it really gets tricky sometimes. It's hard to tough love your kid, and we'll talk about that as we go through. And then there's the parent that doesn't care. No matter how hard I try, the parent that doesn't care, I'm not going to get in seats. I'm not going to get a chance to talk to them. So I'm going to focus on the other four groups, the other four that are here today, are following us on our live feed, everything else, trying to make sure that they're involved in their kids' lives. Those are the groups that we're going to talk about. It really comes down to this, as I said earlier, we are raising the next generation of parents. I have four children, and when I look at my four children, everything that I'm doing today is a lesson they are learning, a lesson that they are going to take with them in their parenting skills and as they develop as a parent. We got to make sure it's the right lesson. And the biggest lesson they got to learn is accountability and responsibility. Responsibility for our actions, being accountable for our actions. All of those apply. All right, go ahead and pop it up for you, if you will. You heard me say this in the video. It's hard to tough love your kids. It is absolutely hard to tough love your kids. My 28-year-old son, when he was 18 years old, and he was always a good kid. I mean, always a good kid. I never had to go get him from school. He never skipped. He didn't do drugs. He didn't do alcohol. None of that. In fact, he was almost the kid that I went, wow, what's he doing that I haven't caught him on yet? You know, that's how we get as parents. We started looking at that. But when he was 18 and he had graduated from high school, he still lived at my house. And I would give him the same speech that my dad gave me. Boy, as long as you live under my roof, you live by my rules. That was the rule for it. But he didn't see that concept. He didn't understand that. In fact, he would leave his room in disarray. He would come in and he can eat. I will tell you that. That boy can eat like nothing I've ever seen. But he would come in, eat everything in the refrigerator, leave the dishes and everything else everywhere. He'd go in and throw all of his surfing stuff, all of his surfing gear in the shower, leave sand and everything else. And repeatedly, I was telling him, you got to stop. You got to stop. You got to take responsibility. You live here. Help me keep this place nice and everything else. My wife and I would constantly share that with him. But he kept on. He kept on. He kept on. And so finally, I gave him his final warning. And it was getting worse. I could see him, you know, he's big now, he's grown, and he was spreading his wings. At 19 years old, he was already being recruited by the Florida Highway Patrol, but he's still doing the knucklehead things that he would do. So he come home one day, and I'd had enough. I'd breached my threshold, and I had the ugliest motorhome you have ever seen in your life. It was a 1971 Travco. It was absolutely. In fact, how many of you saw the motorhome in Christmas Vacation? Who saw that? That was an upgrade compared to mine. It really was. I had gone and picked him out a very nice spot in a trailer park over on 50. I had put the motorhome over there. I had helped him by packing all of his clothes. And when he came home, I loaded him up in the truck and I took him to his new house. And he was not happy. And I'm going to tell you something. While I was packing his clothes, while I was moving him, I had tears flowing down my face because I was sending my boy off. And we always have that thought in our mind. Oh my gosh, I'm sending him off and now he's going to get in trouble and he's going to go to jail and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And if I keep him here right under my roof, I will be able to prevent that from happening. But you know what? Tough love is tough love, and that's what we had to do. And so as I'm driving him and he's following me over, I can tell he's fuming. He's mad as he can be. We get there. I show him the motorhome, and of course he always thought it was the ugliest motorhome anyway. But I said, here you go. This is your house. You leave it in disarray. You do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm gonna pay the bill for you here. I'm gonna keep you straight. You work. You get ready to go to FHP. But this is where you're living. So he gets out. Doesn't even speak to me. He's very upset. We unload his stuff, and I leave. Next day, I call him. He doesn't answer his phone. My heart's beating. I'm thinking I've lost the relationship I always enjoyed with my boy because of this move. The next day, I went over to visit him, and here's what I found. As I pulled up, it was in the afternoon, almost 6 o'clock. As I pulled up, he had a little barbecue grill on a picnic table, and he's out there cooking steaks. And I get out, and he's got the awning out. He's got some chairs set up out there. And as I get out, I said, "How you doing, boy?" He goes, "I'm good." He goes, "Hey, you're not going to stay very long, are you?" And I said, "No, why?" He goes, "Well, I've got a friend coming over, and she and I are just going to kind of hang out and watch TV." And I said, "Okay, that's cool." And I said, "How'd you get set up?" I walk into the motorhome, and it was like walking into the Waldorf Astoria. It was spotless. It was completely clean. Everything was organized, everything else. And I walked away, got in my truck, hugged him, got in my truck, and I thought, that worked. That got his attention. and he's going to go from there. And he did, and I'm very proud of him. But it was the hardest thing. I cried that night. I fought tears back as I was taking him over. But you have to tough love your kid. Now here's your other options. It's hard to tough love your kid, but I can tell you it is harder to go visit them at our jail. It is harder to go visit them in prison. And some of you that may have already experienced that know exactly what I mean. It's hard to walk through that door. It's hard to have to write your kid a letter or correspond with your kid that's in jail and talk to them about everything that's going on. But it's unimaginable to go see your kid in the cemetery. That's your three choices today. That's where we are today in today's society. You tough love your kid, you hold them accountable, or you go to the jail, or unfortunately, the next stop is even the worst. That's where we are today, and we have to get out of that. We have to be a parent again. My parents had it made. I'm telling you right now, they were hardcore, but they knew what they were going to do. They were mission driven. We as parents have to be mission driven. We have to put our mission first, and our mission is raising those kids. All right, I put this in because I always like to look at the definition of something and see how it really fits what we're doing. The practice of training others to follow rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. That's the definition of discipline. That's what if you look on a Google search or if you look on the dictionary, that's what you'll find in different forms. But that's the biggest part of it. That's what we're facing. All right. Now, that's not the practice of discipline alone. Practice of discipline also involves love and nurturing and all of those other things. But this is what pops out when you first put it in. And this is what's the hardest part for us, holding them accountable and correcting them. All right. Some of you may have seen in the brochure, some of you may have seen in some of the advertisements that we did that law enforcement's role in society has morphed. It has changed. Historically, our job was to arrest bad people and keep them in jail and work with our prosecutors to make sure that the criminal justice system took its course. But today, law enforcement officers, and even teachers for that matter, have morphed into, we're more than that. We are the parent, we are the guidance counselor, we are the mentor, we are the corrector, we are everything else in that realm. And we weren't designed to do that. Now, just like with our teachers and our pastors, we are more than happy to do that. We are more than happy to engage and try and keep a kid from going to jail, trying to keep a kid from losing their life, trying to keep a kid from devastating everything they could have had. But that's not what we were designed for. You, as a parent, are the chief law enforcement officer in your child's life. You are the one that spends almost all the time with them. You are the one that has the first chance to correct what they're doing. And you are the one that, quite frankly, has the responsibility to correct what they're doing and hold them accountable. But we get relied on. Not every parent, but a lot of parents have come to us. Mom, dad, grandparent, foster parent, whoever it is that's raising that child is the chief law enforcement officer in that child's life. Not the chief of police, not the sheriff, not the deputy that gets called to respond. And when we start taking that level of action, we will be able to make a difference in that kid's life. Because when we get there, when we are called to the school or we're called to your house, it's already happened. Everything we talk about with crime prevention is let's get you vital crime prevention information before you become a victim. Well, let's get to these kids before they get to us. Because once they get to us, they're already a part of the system. They're already starting to be a part of the process that unfortunately will spin around, chew them up, and spit them out. That's the force that we're dealing with. All right, so what's our parents' role? When we look at the characteristics of parenting, the first one that comes up is loving. How many of you love your kids? How many of you love your kids all the time? How many of you have ever wanted to choke your kids? Absolutely. Reverend Dames, I see you got both hands up right there. Absolutely. All right? But we still love them, don't we? Man, we love them with everything we have. And what do we want for them? We want them to be more successful than we are. That's every parent's dream, is for their child to be more successful than we are. And in loving them, we go back to that tough love. It is hard to tough love your child. It is hard to break your child's heart. It's hard to break your kid's self-esteem, all the things that we as parents have to do sometimes. Then we get to the second one, responsibility. We're responsible for that child. Not only are we responsible for that child, we're responsible for that child's upbringing. We're responsible for how they turn out, everything else. If your child fails, do you blame your child or do you blame yourself? Most of us blame ourselves. Most of us say, I didn't do this right. I didn't do this right, and I didn't do this right. That's the unfortunate side of it. It's not our failure alone. It's our failure alone if we don't engage. It's our failure alone if we're not involved in that child's life. But we got to teach them responsibility as well. We got to teach them to be engaged and hold themselves accountable as we go. Accountability, we just talked about. Role model. We are our child's role model. Every one of us is a role model for the children of today. This afternoon, or the last part of this presentation, you're going to get to do something that very few audiences get a chance to do. After I talk, you're going to hear from our state attorney, David Koenig. He's going to come up and he's going to talk to you about the things you can do to hold your kid in check. And after he's done, we're going to bring in the chain gang. And we're going to sit the chain gang up here on this stage. And they're going to be a panel that you can ask any question you want. You can ask them where their lives started to fail, what was happening in their lives from a parenting standpoint, what type of discipline their parents had. You name it, you can ask them. They are ready and willing to keep another kid from following in their footsteps. And when you as of right now, start thinking about the questions you might want to ask somebody. And I'm going to tell you, they range from somebody that's been arrested twice to somebody that's been arrested 70 times. It's going to sit on this stage with you today. And I won't tell you what it is, but it'll come out. They all share one thing in common. Every one of them shares one thing. Even though they're in for different stuff, they all share one thing in common. And you'll see what that is as we go through. But we have to be the role model. And then we got to be a communicator. How many of you think you're a good communicator? How many of you find that? Dale, what's the biggest part about being a communicator? Okay, all right. How many of you think that's pretty good? Is that pretty close? All right. How many of you think that in addition to that, being a good communicator means you got to be a good listener? Somebody just said it right in the audience. That's exactly right. You have to be a good listener. You also have to be a good watcher. You got to be, we're visual. Everybody in today's society is visual. We got to be watching what's going on in our kids' lives. When you see some of the dangers we'll talk about here as we progress through the program, you've got to be watching what your kid is doing. They're giving you the danger signs. They're giving you the warning signs. You have to pick up on them. It's your job. They may not come out and write you a note and say, hey, I started doing drugs. But they're going to give you a note. You just have to read it. You just have to see the things that are happening as we go through. Talked about chief law enforcement officer and raising the next generation. All right, let me talk a little bit. I'm kind of a little bit of a historian. I believe you got to go back and look at how things happen to understand what's happening next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my mom and dad. And I will tell you, I lost my dad in 1997 to cancer. And it was the most devastating thing I've ever been forced to deal with in my life. But there were times that I absolutely was beside myself with how he and my mom dealt with me as parents. Now, let me set the stage. I was born and raised in a little small town called Green Cove Springs, Florida. Anybody ever heard of that? I know you have, Glenn, because you're from Orange Park right there. So, in fact, we used to beat y'all's team in wrestling all the time. It was really bad. Hey, Reverend Dames is here supporting this cause. I'm at the podium today, Reverend. But when I was growing up, my mom and dad were the chief law enforcement officers in my life. There was never a time. In fact, I'm not even sure I knew who the sheriff was. I didn't think the sheriff was the chief law enforcement officer in my life. In fact, he was the person that I hoped would come save me from my parents when they got to the point they were at, because that's what started happening. My mom was my school bus driver. Anybody else have a mom that was their school bus driver? This is my life. The first time I crossed the street by myself, I drove. The first time I ever stayed someplace other than my parents' house that they weren't there was on my honeymoon. That's where I'm at. All right? Dad didn't live in this world where, hey, I'm going to go over to Roger's house and hang out. All right? No, Roger could come over to our house all he wanted. He could spend every night there. But you weren't going over to Roger's house. Now, Roger was my friend in high school. Let me tell you how bad my dad was. I wasn't allowed to spend the night at Roger Harvey's house. His dad was the undersheriff for the sheriff's office where I grew up at. But I wasn't allowed to go spend the night at his house because my dad said, no, you don't spend the night at anybody's house but ours. Anybody that wants to can come over here, because my dad was going to control what I was doing. That was the way it was going to be. My mom, I would get on her bus every morning. We would go to school. She'd pick me up every afternoon, take me back to the house. It was insane, all right? I did not have the mom that said, when we get home, your dad is going to deal with you. That was not my life. It didn't matter if you were in Publix, Winn-Dixie, the pharmacy. It didn't matter. When you showed off, she dealt with it right then. And her theory was this: well, you showed off in front of people, so I'm going to deal with you in front of people. That was her theory. And then when you got home, you didn't get retribution for what happened in the store. You got targeted by my dad for embarrassing your mom and making her do that. I caused her to have to do that in the store. That was my fault. All right. And you know what? They were right. They were 100% right. My mom and dad fought over whose turn it was to beat me. That's where we were in my house. That's how it was. But you know what? When I got married, my wife, Susan, she never had a chance to meet my dad. When I got married, Susan said, "What was your dad like?" And I said, "He was incredible. He was my mentor. He was the person that I always looked up to. He was the person that I was afraid of." She said, "Wow, that's pretty sad that you were afraid of your dad." And I said, "I wasn't afraid of him that way. I certainly was, because my dad would tune you up. There was no doubt about it. And I was the smallest of three boys. But I was afraid of disappointing my dad. I was afraid of letting my dad down. And that is what she didn't pick up on. That was the fear of letting my parents down is what held tight to me. My mom is 74 years old right now. All right. I did not invite her, purposely did not invite her to this today, because I didn't want her to hear how bad I'm going to talk about how she dealt with me. Because she would come up on this stage and deal with me right now. Be no mistake about it. She would. All right. Give you an example of my dad, and this is where we've made a change. And Richard from the Teachers Association, you will accept this very well, I believe. When I was a freshman in high school, I brought home for the first time, maybe the only time now that I think about it, straight A's on my report card. I was really proud of it. I had like 6 PEs and a lunch, I think is what I had in there. But I brought home straight A's. And when I got home, I handed the report card to my dad. Now, there was a little bit of flaw in how proud I was, because I brought home straight A's, but I also brought home straight N's in citizenship for needs improvement. Now, my dad always would sit at the table and he'd have his glasses down and he read out the bottom of his glasses, and he gets the report card and he's looking at it and he's reading it. And he looks over at me, looks back at the report card, and I'm like, I'm thinking this is going to be good, right? So my dad looks over and goes, "What are these N's?" My dad didn't say, "Hey, man, these A's are awesome." All right. My dad went right to what he knew I could control as well. He said, "What are these N's?" And I said, "Dad, come on." I said, "How can I have straight A's and be behaving and misbehaving in class?" My dad says, "Well, it says right here that you can't be quiet in class, that you keep talking all the time in each one of your classes. Each one of your teachers felt compelled to write that." I said, "How disruptive can I be if I'm making straight A's?" And my dad's comment, "Wayne, even somebody that's not real smart can be quiet. You apparently are the smartest kid in the class, so you better be the quietest kid in the class from now on." That's what he was focusing on. He was focused on my character. He was focused on my behavior, because every bit of it extended to what I would become when I become a parent, to what I would become when I become a young man as I was growing up. But that was Dad. That's how he dealt with it. I'll tell you the story of my mom. On her bus one day, I got in a little bit of an altercation. All right. Now, me and a kid in the back of the bus got in a little bit of fight, and my mom saw me kind of slap the kid in the face. All right. It happened. Not proud of it, but it did. She stopped the bus. She brought me up to the front seat. When everybody got off the bus at school that morning, because it was on the way to school, she turned around and popped me, just like I'd popped him. She said, "How'd that feel?" I said, "Not good." She wrote me up and sent me to the dean. The dean gets it and goes, "Boy, you must have been really bad for your own mom to write you up." So I get paddling from the dean. Then I get back on the bus that afternoon, and my mom made me sit in the front seat for 2 weeks, and I couldn't talk. Well, that's like killing me right there. So then I get home, and here we go. I embarrassed my mom. So now Dad's dealing with me and punishing me for that. I got punished like 6 times for the same thing. I was thinking there's got to be something wrong with this. In fact, it was a catalyst behind becoming a cop, because I knew that you shouldn't be able to do that. But that was my parents. For 2 weeks, I had to sit on the front of the bus and not be able to talk. And Dad was mad because I caused my mom to do that. Well, we've lost that parenting skill. We've lost that. All right. You take my mom out and put another bus driver on there, and in today's time, it'd be the bus driver's fault. It'd be the bus driver's fault for not controlling me and having me sit down. We have lost it. We have to get back to where parents understand that their kids are not going to tell them the truth about every single thing they do. There's no doubt about that. My dad was my best friend, but he was also the person I feared the most. I feared disappointing him. I feared letting him down. And I know in my heart that I did everything I could as I was growing up to never cause that, to never let that happen. Wow. What about this mess? How many of you know who that is? Miley Cyrus. Hard to kind of follow her through those different slides there, because boy, what a transition. What a change. What caused that? That's probably a very good analogy of it. All right. How about instant fame? How about not being held accountable? How about not having an actual strong parent figure in her life? All of those things would be arguable, and we could say every one of them happened. Now, there might be a parent on the other end, Billy Ray, who's saying, no, that's not true. I was involved in my kid's life. I was involved in keeping her straight. And that might be an arguable point, except for he admits it now himself. Every time you heard him speak, he would get up on stage and he would talk about how great friends they were, how the best thing they had going for them was their friendship. You have to find and strike a balance between being your kid's friend and being your kid's parent. Just like when you're a boss at work, you have to find a balance between being the person that works for you, treating them as a family member, as a friend, and holding them accountable for their actions. Well, this failed. This young lady, and if she was standing here right now, I would say the same thing. This young lady went from having an unbelievable character and respect model to now, at times, people are laughing about the stuff she does. And look what her dad says. Look what dad says about it. How many interviews did I give and say, what's important between me and Miley is to try and be a friend to my kids? I said it a lot. And sometimes I would even read other parents might say, you don't need to be a friend. You need to be a parent. Well, I'm the first guy to say to them right now, you were right. I should have been a better parent. I should have. I said, enough is enough. It's getting dangerous and somebody's going to get hurt. I should have. I didn't. Honestly, I didn't know the ball was out of bounds until it was way up in the stands somewhere. Pretty profound to hear from a parent. Somebody who is wide known throughout the country, throughout the world. Somebody whose child is extremely famous. And somebody who has now stood up and said, man, I dropped the ball. Didn't know how bad it was, how far it was out of bounds until the ball was already way up in the stands. That's the mistake we make. We don't see the warning signs. We don't start picking up. How many of you want to believe everything your kid says to you? How many of you? Guess what? All right, now hold your hands up for me again. I want to count. All right? So about 15, 16 parents. All right? How many of you lied to your parents? You can go ahead and put them on up. Every one of us did. So does it make sense that your kids aren't lying to you? They are. And it's sad to say, and I feel bad about standing up here on the stage and telling you your kids are going to lie to you, but they are. And you have to be ready to catch them in that lie. Knowing how to catch them is one of the things that we want you to walk away with this today. When you checked in at our crime prevention table out there, we gave you drug screens. How many of you feel really good about drug screening your kid? Nobody. None of us really want. You do? I'm with you. All right, I get it. But wouldn't it be nice if we never had to worry about that? Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to come get a drug screen and be able to do it? But that's the world we live in today. Society has changed so much. You heard me say in the opening video, today's challenges for parents and kids are like nothing we've ever seen before. Those challenges are off the chain. Those challenges are things that none of us were prepared to deal with. None of us grew up with this stuff in our lives. We talked earlier about my father and his style and everything else. Back when I was a kid growing up, it wasn't DCF, it was HRS. All right? How many of you remember HRS? Health and Absolutely. All right? When I was growing up, and I'm going to tell my age a little bit here, we had a rotary dial telephone. You can't send text messages from those. You cannot. You can't do any of the things we do today. I remember one time my dad was on me for some stuff I had done, and I deserved it. There was no doubt about it. And I blurted out the words, I'm going to call HRS. That impressed him. He walked into the laundry room where the closest phone was. He walked back with it in his hands, the whole phone, the sheetrock still around it where he snatched it out of the wall. The wires were hanging out of the phone. He threw it on the floor in front of me and said, call whoever you want, but before they get here, it's going to get worse. My dad was a little bit off the edge. I will tell you that. But boy, he kept his 3 boys in check. All right. I made that threat one time in my life. Oh, by the way, he took my allowance to pay for fixing the phone. All of it, because I did cause that. I was going to call HRS. You know what? We can't live in that world. HR or DCF does a great job in our society. They have a role and a responsibility. And sometimes when people look at their job, they find disservice with it, they find disfavor with it. But they're trying to do a good job for us. But we can't live in fear where we think DCF's going to knock on the door. We can't live in that fear. We have to live in the fear that we're doing it right in our hearts to help that kid become the next parent. That's where we have to go. Parenting today versus yesterday. Evolution's begun. And I say begun because it's not through. Technology, all the other things that you'll see up here, all of it has changed. Let's look at each one of them. The activities that we see today versus yesterday. When I grew up, my brothers and I would play with the kids in the neighborhood. We'd play Army. We absolutely would. We had sometimes guns we'd made out of 2x4s, or you had a broomstick or whatever it was that you had that we were using it as a gun. All right, so we can't sit there and say, well, you know, video games are causing this because they're showing people guns and everything else. We made guns. We figured out what was going to be our gun, our water pistol, whatever it was. It's still emulated. And then we would hide and we would shoot at each other, you know, fake shoot, bow, 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 as you ran by and everything else. And then when we were done, we all sat down at the picnic table together and had lunch together. And we were friends again. We'd break up. We were competitive. We were doing this, but we would break it up. And then we'd have lunch. And then we'd go back, and now we'd find hickory nuts, and those would be our hand grenades. And we would throw them. And somebody would ultimately get hit in the head with a hickory nut. And then Mom would come out the house, and everybody would run and scatter, all right? And didn't know who threw it, but we knew. But at the end of the day, we were all friends, and we were all going to school the next morning, and everybody was hanging out. Today's kids don't go out in the yard and do that. Today's kids get on a video. They sit in front of a plasma TV, and they shoot people. There are simulations of people that they have no idea who they are. There's no recourse for their actions. There's no, I know that person, or there's no emotion. There's no drama, feeling to it, or anything. And while they're doing it, they talk on chat with their buddies, talking about, oh, that was a nice shot, man. Way to head shoot that guy. Everything else. That's the difference in where we're dealing today. We have taken the friendship out of it. We've taken all of that out. My kid loves to play soccer. And I told him one day, I said, hey, when you get to high school, you want to be on the varsity? He said, yeah. I said, do you need thumbs in soccer? He said, what do you mean? I said, do your thumbs need to be really coordinated in soccer? He said, no. I said, well, you better get out there and start kicking a ball then, because all this thumb work you're doing on the video game ain't going to do it for you, pal. You better get out there and start training, because the other kid's out there training. That other kid's out there kicking the ball, getting ready to do it. But we see these video games, and it doesn't matter what it is. How many of you as parents have ever played Grand Theft Auto? Anybody? How many you have, Glenn? That frightens me. Like on a video game. Okay, I just want to make sure you hadn't really stolen a car. Mike, can you get him? He said that's how he keeps his kids from playing it. How many of you have ever played Modern Warfare? How many of you have ever played Monopoly? See a big difference? See what we're dealing with in the generational differences of parenting? We're not prepared to deal with all this stuff. Most of you couldn't even turn on an Xbox or a PlayStation if you had to. Most of you don't even know what it is. All right? Or Facebook or any of this other stuff that our generations are dealing with today. That's what we're seeing. Communication. Talking at supper versus texting. I had a parent not long ago tell me that she actually was out in the kitchen preparing dinner for the family and got a text message from their daughter who was in her bedroom wanting to know what time is dinner. This is the bad part, though. I said, what'd you do? Texted her back. All right? You know what? We've dropped that ball. We have lost that communication edge, and we're sending text messages to talk. Ronald Reagan said one time that the next great idea for our country will be thought of at the dinner table while families are talking. He's absolutely right. But we don't do that anymore. We've lost that value. We now text. Or where's how many of you have Facebook? That's where we find out about stuff. All right? That's where we go and find out what's going on in the community, what's happening with kids. Look at the stuff people put on Facebook today. It's amazing. I can find out if somebody's got an illness. I can find out if somebody's got a divorce. You name it, I can read it all right there on Facebook. And our kids are engaging in that as well. Every one of them, and we're letting them do it. Then we get to social media. We'll talk about that a little bit deeper. How about clothes? When we look at the clothes our kids are wearing today, I will give you a dynamic example. I used to be the head wrestling coach at Vero Beach High School. And when I took over the team, we had 11 wrestlers to fill 14 weight classes. That's what we had. They hadn't won a match in 2 years. When I took over the team, I brought with me what I learned from my coach, Pete McCabe, who was the head wrestling coach at Clay High School. I brought with me what Pete had taught us. And that was, when you go away to a match, you wear a tie. You look sharp when you get off the bus. People look at you and immediately they go, man, they look pretty sharp. They must be a pretty good team. And so I embraced that, and I told our 11 wrestlers, tomorrow we have our first going away match. You're going to wear a tie to school. And if you don't have one, I have a bag of ties that I will give you. I'd actually made good friends with the funeral home director, and he'd give me a bunch of the ties. And I made sure I told them that so they would bring their own ties. But when they got there, one kid didn't have a tie. He said, Coach, I didn't have a chance to go get one. Don't you worry about it. He had one of the nicest looking velour bow ties you've ever seen in your life when he got off that bus. He had a tie the next time I saw him. It was really kind of funny. But they griped. When I told those kids, you're going to wear a tie, every one of them rolled their eyes and were disgusted. The next day, because they had to wear it to school, the next day, they all wore their ties to school. And on the bus, the team captain come to me and said, Coach, can we wear ties for every match, not just away matches? I said, if the team votes on it, and that's what they want to do. So we started doing it. That following year, we had 110 kids come out for our wrestling team. Not because we had a tremendous winning record, because we only won 4 matches that year. It was because we started demonstrating ourselves with character, with class, with stepping up a notch above everybody else. 4 years later, we would win the region tournament and place 9th in the state. And the following year, during the first football game, last minute they called me and they said, can you get your returning wrestlers to the football game? Because at halftime, we want to recognize them and the basketball team that took runner-up. We want to recognize them at the halftime. I said, sure. So myself and assistant coach, we started calling everybody. Boom, 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 boom. Calling them. Got to be there at such and such. Meet us at this location, everything else. And I forgot one thing. I forgot to tell them to wear a tie. Didn't think about it. Just scatterbrained, getting everybody called. So my assistant coach, Coach Dean, and I are standing up at the meeting point, and I said, man, we forgot to tell the kids to wear ties. Of course, he's in a tie and I'm in a tie, but we forgot to tell the kids to wear a tie. We had 11 returning wrestlers. 11 kids showed up that night wearing a tie. They didn't have to be told to. They did it. When we walked across the football field, the basketball team had gone before us, and they took second in the state that year. And they got, all right, their shirts were all untucked, all right, everything else. When our team walked across, they walked across in a straight single file line wearing their ties, and they got a standing ovation. That's how they presented themselves. Because of how, when we look at the clothes that kids are wearing today, who buys those clothes for those kids? Us. If I'm buying it, you're wearing what I want you to wear. And you better not cut the sleeves out of it or anything else when you come home, because there's going to be heck to pay. You're the one that's in charge. You're the one that when they walk out the house and they're looking like that, that's who let them go out the house like that. And as parents, we have to stop. We have to correct that. Respect we talked about. How about music? You're going to hear some music on the breaks as we take breaks. You're going to hear some music on the breaks, and you're going to go, that's some pretty retro stuff. But it's our generation, my generation, and then you listen to what's going on today, all the curse words. You go in to buy something on iTunes and look at how many songs have explicit written beside it. They're not making those songs and selling them on iTunes because nobody's buying them. They're making those songs and selling them on iTunes because everybody's buying them. You have to control your child's music library. You have to control their video library. You have to control their video games. Every bit of it you have to control. And then we get to TV. Wow. Man, I grew up with Andy Griffith. I grew up with Perry Mason. All right, those were the shows. Were they great, dynamic shows filled with action? Absolutely not. But they were filled with character. They were filled with things that are a message of how we should be. Those are the stuff. Now look at what we got. Teen Mom. What message does that send? Not only is it okay to be a teen mom, but you can have your own reality show or be a part of a reality show. You can be glamorized for being a teen mom. We got 16 and Pregnant. I got to be honest with you, I've never watched one of these. I'm going to tell you that right now, and I don't know if you have. We got Jersey Shore. All of those send the same message. All of those are messages that really and truly our parents wouldn't have let us watch, and we shouldn't be letting our kids watch. And then we get to sensationalism. All right? And I found two extremes. Not too long ago, probably about a month and a half ago, I'm sitting and I'm watching TV, and I just sat down. I got home late, and I was grabbing something to eat, sat down, and my 14-year-old had, now think about this, I have a 28-year-old, I have a 24-year-old, I have a 16-year-old, and I have a 14-year-old. If any of you want the 14-year-old, I will get him to you today. All right? But he's a good kid. I just got to keep him for 4 more years. That's the whole problem here. But he had been watching wrestling. And so I just sat down. I never watched professional wrestling at this point in my life. All right? I was a wrestler and everything else. Anybody that's ever been a wrestler knows that this kind of wrestling is not real. And Glenn, I hate to tell you that. You probably thought it was, but it's not. So, but this kind of wrestling is not real. And I'm watching. And the second video I'll show you is the one that I was watching. And I was absolutely floored by what was on it. And so I went back and I found the first video I'm going to show you. And I want you to see, bear with me and watch these videos and see the distinct difference between the messages that we send to kids.
Flair. No respect, no honor. There is no honor among thieves in the first place. He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family. You don't know what hard times are, Daddy. Hard times are when the textile workers around this country are out of work and got 4 or 5 kids and can't pay their wages, can't buy their food. Hard times are when the auto workers are out of work and they tell them go home. And hard times are when a man has worked at a job 30 years. 30 years. They give him a watch, kick him in the butt, and say, hey, a computer took your place, Daddy. That's hard.
Now, everybody knows Dusty Rhodes. What was in his message just then? He talked about honor. He talked about no honor among thieves. He talked about what hard times really are. And then he concluded with a computer took your job. Everything that he said, oh, and by the way, what's he wearing? Wearing a suit and a tie, all right? Everything that he said gave some sense of good character. He's teaching a lesson. There is no honor among thieves. There has to be honor in life. Hard work, hard work, hard work. All of those were the things that he was talking about. Was he being sensational? Absolutely. Was he selling tickets? Absolutely. Was he talking about violence? Absolutely. All right, wrestling, when you saw him back in the day with Gordon Soley and everybody else, they were going to be elbow smashing people and picking them up and body slamming them, everything else. That's violent. But there was another message attached to it. It was the true version of good versus evil versus what we see now of evil versus more evil. Check out the next one. Look at today's version of wrestling.
You can do about it! You said I hate you, and now you're gonna feel my wrath! Do you understand me? Do you? Do you? Huh? Come on, tough guy! Fight me! Fight me! You're nothing! You're nothing!
He's handcuffed, by the way.
So with a chair.
I apologize for this being graphic, but it's driving me home.
Teach him a lesson. Teach him, Paul.
Look at the faces in the audience behind them and count how many kids you see. And I want you to listen to what he said.
Myself for you. I fathered you. I cared about you. You were everything to me.
All right? Any difference? That's what we let our kids watch today. That's what my kid was watching. Not anymore. That's what our kids watch today. That's modern warfare. That's what message was in that? Beat a helpless person, double team, telling somebody you're beating that you love them, telling somebody you're beating that you fathered them. All of these other messages that are tied up in that. Go backwards. Go back to Dusty Rhodes. Which one had the better message? That's what's happened with society. That's where we are today. Let's look at our education. 1969, look where the parents are standing. Parents are standing beside the teacher. Parents are standing there saying, explain these bad grades to the kid. I can tell you, that's my mom and dad. That was absolutely them. When I grew up, if I came home and the teacher said I was talking, I was talking. If I came home and the teacher said I skipped school, I skipped school. If I came home and the teacher said I was a disruption to the class, I was a disruption to the class. And I had to go back and apologize to the teacher for being a disruption to the class. Now fast forward to where we are today and look at the second part of that. They're standing beside the kid, having the teacher explain these bad grades. Where we've gone. We've gone full circle now. We have gone full circle. I talked to you about what happened when I got in trouble at school. I'll share with you real quick. I happened to be in court one day in Fort Pierce, and a grandparent, a grandfather had been brought in, and he had been charged with child abuse for the way he had disciplined the kid. And so I'm actually on another case, I'm waiting for my case to come up, and the grandparent is called up in front of the judge, and the judge talks to him about why he disciplined the kid. And he said he made straight F's on his report card. And I told him he can't do that. I'm raising him. I'm the grandparent. I'm raising this kid. And we have many, many grandparents that raise their children today. The judge said, well, you can't do this. You can't discipline this kid this way. He had used a fly swatter on the kid's backside. All right? Left some marks. The judge said you can't do it that way. And so the judge tells him and his attorney, I want you to go to this parenting class. And at the end of the parenting class, we will give you the grandchild back and you can be on, move on. And the grandfather leans over, and I can't hear what he's saying, but he's talking to the attorney. And then he looks back at the judge and he says, Your Honor, may I say something? He says, absolutely. He said, so you're telling me he brought home straight F's and I have to go to a parenting class? And the judge said, yes, absolutely. And the man said to the judge, and when you're in front of the judge, you're a little bit nervous, but he wasn't. He said, I made straight A's in parenting class. I'm not going to another parenting class. If I can't have him back today, then you keep him. And the judge shook his head. He said, you're going to go to a parenting class. He said, no, sir. Go ahead and take me back to the jail. I'll go to jail. The judge talked to the clerk for a minute, talked to the prosecutor, got through, and he said, I'm going to let you have your kid back, but try not to leave marks on him. All right? Now, that grandparent got it. That grandparent saw what was happening. All right? The kid's the one that brought home straight F's, but the grandparent was the one that had to go back to class. Doesn't make sense to me. And then I'll tell you the story about Miss Williams. I grew up, as I said, in Green Cove Springs, Florida. I wrestled and played football with two young men by the name of Ivan and Keenan Williams. Ivan and Keenan were the two boys from a family of 15 kids and a single mom. Ivan wasn't allowed to come to wrestling practice on Tuesday because that was his day to clean the house. Keenan wasn't allowed to come to wrestling practice on Thursday because that was his day to clean the house. Same thing applied to football. So Coach McCabe one day goes over to Miss Williams' house. He says, look, I really need the boys in practice. I need them there every day. Can they clean the house on Saturday? And Miss Williams said, no, they clean the house on their day. I have a rotation for the kids. And he said, I really need them at practice. And Miss Williams said to Coach, do you need them there bad enough for you to come clean the house on Tuesdays and Thursdays? He said, well, of course not. She goes, then you don't need them that bad. If they want them to wrestle, they won't be there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right, because she had to survive. She was very structured. But the real story with Miss Williams is this. I'm over at her house playing basketball one day, and Ivan shoved me. And a bad word may have slipped out of my mouth when Ivan shoved me. And the next thing I know, on the backs of my legs, I feel pain. And what I felt was her hitting me with a grapevine on the backs of my legs. Now, I was like, what, stop. All right, she told me I don't talk that way in her yard and to go home. Now, I'm going to tell you how old I was. I drove home. All right, that's how old I was when Miss Williams put the switch on me. And when I got to my house, my dad and mom was sitting in the swing out front. And as I walked by, my father saw the blood running down the back of my legs. He said, boy, what happened to you? I told him what happened. He goes, I bet you won't do that again. We didn't sue Miss Williams. All right, none of that. What we did was it takes a community to raise a community. And that's what we were dealing with back then. But our lives have changed so much as we go through. And then we get to the excuses. Why we don't do it. If you're a single parent, how many of you are single parents? I'm going to tell you right now, you can't use it as a crutch. You have to use it as a motivator. It has to be that because you're a single parent, you have to work harder than the other parents. You have to be more involved. You have to be the person that is there for every piece of their time, not just half of it or a shared responsibility. It cannot be a crutch. It has to be a motivator. And they can't use it against you either. The parent that doesn't believe in punishing bad behavior, well, we all have to have some understanding of that if you misbehave, there are consequences for it. So you can't use that as an excuse either. And my kids will not listen to me. I promise you have to start this at a foundation. You have to start it as you're coming up, and it's got to be a foundation that's built into that kid. Every kid doesn't listen. In fact, most kids don't listen. They reach an age where they can just unbelievably tune us out. They can turn us off. But that's not an excuse. And then we don't know what else to do. We've reached a point of desperation, so we throw our hands up in the air and we do nothing. All of those are precursors to what you'll see in the last part. If you're going through a divorce or you're a divorced parent, you and the other parent, if they're involved in any capacity, have to find middle ground and have to be in sync. I know we go to parenting classes and everything else, but it's not just about that parenting class. It's about you being in sync. If that child is on restriction at your house and they go over to their house for the weekend, the restrictions should go with them. The parents have to make sure that the middle is not played against them. They can't have that. And it's hard sometimes because if you got along with the other parent, you'd probably still be together. So you have your differences. And then we have the Disney World parents that all they want to do is when they have the kids, they want to take them to Disney World or they want to take them to do fun stuff and bring them back to you so that you're doing all the hard stuff. You have to share it. Even though you're not living in the same household, you have to share it. You have to be engaged in it. Expectations at both houses. My wife taught me a very valuable lesson. My 14-year-old is my stepboy. Actually, my 16 and 14-year-old. My stepboys. And sometimes when they're in different environments, they learn to behave differently. They learn what's acceptable here and what's acceptable there. And sometimes when they would come back, there would be a point where we'd say, okay, all right, you're acting this way, you know what we expect. And so one night I'm having that conversation. And I said, hey, where are you at? That was the question I asked. Where are you at? And their response was, y'all's house. I said, and what are you expected to do when you're here? Yes, sir, we understand. All right? A few minutes later, my wife and I would have a side conversation. And she said, just me and you talking here. You know what message you just told them? I said, what's that? She said, that it's okay to misbehave when they're somewhere else, whether they're at school, they're out on the playground, or wherever else, as long as they behave here. And that's not acceptable. She was 100% right. I was dead off base. It's not okay to behave differently anywhere. You should always behave the same way every place you go. And both parents have to hold them accountable for that, and teachers and law enforcement officers and everybody else is involved in that process. So I was 100% off base. All right, our mistakes that we make. Hurts the discipline. We talked about that. Finding balance in what you want from them and what they want from you. I wanted my son to be a school teacher. All right? He got a partial wrestling scholarship. He went away, was taking classes to be a school teacher. blew out his knee. They sent him home, and he started going to BCC, actually Eastern Florida State now. Starts going to BCC. He's bringing home some of the worst grades I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he set the bar really, really high for bad grades is what he was doing. And I sat him down. I'm like, boy, you're killing me. I'm spending money putting you through college, and you are failing classes and all this other stuff. He was going to class. It wasn't like he was skipping or anything. He was going. I said, what is wrong with you? He said, I don't want to be a school teacher. And I said, that's always been your dream, is to be a school teacher and a wrestling coach. And he said, no, that's always been your dream for me. And I said, well, what is your dream? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, how about you want to be an accountant? He said, Dad, I'm horrible at math. I said, how about a business degree? You want to get a business degree? He said, I'm horrible at math. I said, yeah, that's a good point. I said, how about culinary? He said, I don't know if I want to cook for the rest of my life. I said, well, how about drafting? I said, you like to draw and everything. He said, you skipped one in the C's. I said, what's that? He says, criminal justice. Now, my response, all right, because this was my dream for him, not his dream. My response was, son, you don't want to be a cop. You'll never make any money. And he said, school teachers make less than cops, Dad. It's not about money. It's about what you want from me and about you being scared for me to go after this. He was right. He ended up getting recruited by the Highway Patrol. He wanted to be a K-9. He's a K-9 now. And this past Tuesday, he was named as a State Trooper of the Year for the entire state of Florida because he's doing what he loves. He is doing what he loves. And that is what it's about. We have to find that balance between our dream and their dream. The two are different. And their dream may change. Our job is to not dream for them. Our job is to make sure that we steer them toward being successful so they can achieve their dreams. That's what our job as parents is. Parents are uninformed on today's resources. That's why we wanted to put this together. That's why we asked David to come in and talk to you about what you can actually do as a parent. What are the dangers that are out there? All of those together. And then this, Facebook. How many of you, your kids have a Facebook page? Okay. How many of you have the password to your kid's Facebook page? Some of you don't. I'm seeing fewer hands go up. You should have. And you should have the password to your kid's email. And you should have the password to everything on your kid's computer. You should be dealing with it every day, watching it. Parenting is a 24-hour-a-day job now. It used to be that we dealt with these issues at school and on the playground. Today, we deal with them 24 hours a day right there, every bit of it. Who are they with? Well, we used to have to worry about who they were with when they went to a school function. Today, we got to worry about who they're with when they're playing Xbox, when they're playing on Facebook, when they're doing Twitter, when they're texting, when they're doing all this other stuff. That's what we have to worry about today. And we're not doing it. We as parents, we see it every day. I had a parent that told me her son wouldn't give her the password to his computer. Said that he wouldn't do it. And she says, what do I do? I feel like my hands are tied. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, do you own the computer? She said, yes. I said, is it a laptop? She said, yes. Now, keep in mind, folks, I'm a little bit over the edge here, all right? And I'm not suggesting that this is the right, perfect way for everybody to do it, but it's certainly an attention getter. And I said, well, call him out in the garage and let him watch you as you run over it with the car. You won't need his password anymore. And the next time he gets a computer, he'll be more than happy to give it to you. Now, that's an extreme, all right? And I'm not saying you have to take it to that extreme, but here's what you do have to do. Physically take it from them. Pick it up and walk away from them and say, you're not getting this back until I get the password. You're not getting this back until I can monitor what you're doing. And a lot of times we as parents don't want to tell our kids we're monitoring. A lot of times we as kids want to do it covertly. I got news for you. Knowing you're being watched is a deterrent to crime. Knowing you're being watched is a deterrent to misbehavior. So tell them you're doing it. Don't tell them how you're doing it, but tell them you're doing it. Make sure they know. When you look at all the stuff we deal with today online and texting and everything else, next slide, please. When you look at all of that, man, it's out of this world. It's crazy. Passwords, drugs, sexting, bullying on Facebook. All right? How many of you, as a kid growing up, had to deal with any of that up there? None of it. In fact, when I was a kid growing up, drugs wasn't even the biggest issue. Alcohol was, and it's just as bad. All right? But that was the biggest issue back then. We have gone through an evolution, a transformation. Passwords, we got to worry about getting our kids' passwords now. Then we get it, and we don't use it for 3 weeks. So what have they done? They've changed it. It is a 24-hour-a-day job. It is the toughest job in the world being a parent, and you have to engage 24 hours a day. Drugs, as I said earlier, we gave you the drug kits, but that's only one. Don't just drug screen your kid one time. Drug screen your kid routinely so that you can monitor what they're doing and they know you're going to do it. It's not just once and they go, hey, I didn't get caught, and they move on. Drug screen them routinely. Keep it going. Sexting, nothing else needs to be said about that. You look at the texting and all the stuff that goes on, it is outrageous. How many of your kids have cell phones? All right. How many of them have texting capability? How many of you look at their text messages? How many of you compare their text messages to their phone records? All right? Because that's what you need to do. You need to give your kid a set order. You are not allowed to delete text messages. And then you print out their bill of when they texted somebody, and you look at the text and it came in at 10:02, there better be a text over here that came in at 10:02, because if not, they deleted it. And if they're deleting texts, they are deleting something they are scared of you finding out. They are deleting a relationship with somebody they shouldn't be with. They are deleting something about drugs. They are deleting something about associations, anything else. But once they delete it, they've deleted it so you can't see it. Print out their bill. Let them know you're doing it. Make them watch you. Ask them questions. Everything. Again, it's a deterrent to being on it. Bullying on Facebook. Bullying used to occur in the playground, on the school bus. Today it occurs in the bedroom when they're sitting at their table with their laptop. That's where bullying occurs today. That's what we're dealing with today. We see it all the time. We see people taking their lives because of bullying. We see young men and women that allow compromising photographs to be taken of themselves. And then they break up with the person they're dating, and the next thing you know, that compromising photograph is on Facebook, or it's on a Google, someplace where you can get it on a search engine or something like that. And guess what? It is devastating their lives. We are actually right now working with Tommy Goodson, our House of Representatives member here in Brevard County, passing to put through a bill that would prohibit somebody from putting a pornographic photograph up with a name attached or a searchable attached. All right, the picture itself is First Amendment protected, but the name is protected by the person that owns it and doesn't give their permission. We have to do it. We have people that are committing suicide because they go apply for jobs, and when they Google search them to see what's going on, that picture pops up and is devastating their lives. All because that kid at 16 or 17 years old made a bad mistake. No, we have to educate them about where those mistakes lead. Once it gets on Facebook, it's viral, it's gone. And then the associations, not just at school, not just at a party. That's where we as parents worry about. You better be more worried about who they associate with on the internet. That's where the real danger even comes in. Whether they're younger and they're associating with somebody they have no idea who they are, that is a sexual predator that is after them, or they're older and they absolutely know who they're hanging out with and they are a gang member or something of that nature that is going to drag them down the road. Either one of those are just as bad. And we have to know it. We have to monitor it. I want you to go on your kid's Facebook page and look at every friend and ask them about every one. It's time consuming, but you ask them about every friend. Who's their parents? Then you start looking and watching what they're doing, their messaging, everything else. But you should be able to watch it. You should be able to see who they're dealing with. When should you be concerned? Any change in behavior. That's the first thing. And I put this, if sometimes when we get sick in today's society, we don't feel well or we feel like something's wrong, what do? We go online and we research symptoms, don't we? And if you search, you can absolutely identify what your ailment is. You may have a twisted ankle, and before you know it, you've convinced yourself you got a brain tumor because those are the symptoms of it. But the first thing it tells you is any symptom you look at, the first thing it tells you is changes in behavior, changes in physical composition, all of those things. It might be weight loss, it might be this, it might be that, but it's the key to everyone. Changes in behavior is the key to your kid hanging out with the wrong person, your kid struggling for something, and that's the first thing you should pick up on. They appear withdrawn, they appear angry, depressed, or have mood swings. Now, certainly becoming a teenager would embody any of that, would create some of that. But it's that extended, and it's when you see it and you start questioning it. That's the biggest part. Question your kid. Why are you acting like this? Is there something wrong? Is there something that's happened at school? Is there somebody you're worried about? Are you being bullied? All of these are questions that you have to ask. But you know what we do? We go in, we sit down, and we say, hey, is everything okay? Yeah, I'm tired. All right. How many of your kids have ever told you they're tired when you're trying to talk to them? Yeah, they're not tired. All right, that's their mechanism of telling you, yeah, something's really wrong. All right, they're not too tired to go out and play. They're not too tired to go out and talk to their friends on the phone or anything else. They're too tired to talk to you. You have to push them for it. You have to get that information from them. Loss of an old friend. All right, Secretive about the new friends. Loss of an old friend. Because that old friend has told them, you're doing wrong. You are hanging with people that I am not going to associate with. That old friend is separated from them because they don't want to go down the same path that they're heading down. And then you get to meet the new friends, and boy, that's always nice. Declining grades or trouble at school. About 7th grade is when we start to see kids struggle in school, and immediately when they struggle in school, they start turning toward crime. They start turning toward gangs, they start turning toward drugs, so that they can fill that void that they're missing. That's where we're at. Skipping school, obviously, not just skipping school one time. How many of you skip school? Wow, you guys are a bunch of violators. All right, of course, it happens. But when they're skipping school every day and they're not showing up and those teachers are calling you, you better get engaged. You better get involved. Warning signs of drug or alcohol abuse, physical or mental problems, memory lapses, poor concentration, bloodshot eyes, lack of coordination, or slurred speech. Every one of those are pretty definite warning signs. Having bloodshot eyes or dilated pupils, using eye drops to mask the signs. How many of you search your kid's bedroom? Pretty good. All right. Do you give it what we call the jailhouse search? You turn up everything in there, go through it all. That's what I want you to do. I want you to look for everything, and I want you to question them. You have to ask, what is this? How many of you search their cars if they're old enough to drive? All right. Look for things like this. Eye drops, abundance of mints, stuff of that nature that they're trying to mask what they're doing. When you're in their car, if you see a seed in the floorboard, listen, I guarantee you, you go out to my truck, you're going to see seeds in the floorboard because Burger King buns have them on top of it. But that's not the kind of seeds we're talking about. We're talking about marijuana. We're talking about signs of drug use. You start seeing those things, you ought to get on it right away and get help. Don't just rely on yourself being able to talk them out of it. Missing money, valuables, or prescriptions, or constantly asking you for money. Talk to, if your child has immediate contact with the grandparents, talk to the grandparents and ask them, are they coming and getting money from you? Are they asking you for money all the time? If they are, please ask your grandparents, don't give them any money. Tell them what's going on. Communicate with them. Remember, it takes a community to raise a community. You have to engage everyone in this struggle, in this battle. But one of the first signs of drugs is they're looking for money everywhere. Stuff starts missing from the house. You can't find your favorite ring or something like that. It might be at the pawn shop, or it might have been sold to somebody at school for 40 bucks. You have no way of knowing. So you start seeing that, you need to be on it. Go back for just one, please, Miss Lindsay. Prescription drugs. If you just had your tooth pulled and you have oxycodone in the house or you have something of that nature, count your pills. Put them in a safe. Don't just leave them out, because one of two things happen. Either they take them themselves or they take them to school and sell them. And either one of those two is just as bad. And I'll give you an idea, do we have that kind of problem in Brevard County? In the past 5 years, over 1,000 people have died because of prescription drug overdose in Brevard County. So yeah, we got to be worried about it. We have to deal with it. Sudden weight loss or weight gain. I can honestly tell you I have never had sudden weight loss. That has never happened. All right, next slide, please. All right, we talked a little bit about social media dangers, unguarded activities. You need to know who they're talking to, just like you would need to know if they're going over to their house. If they're going away and going out to eat with them, you need to know who it is. Identity theft. We, as parents, we don't think about protecting our kids from identity thieves. We let them put up everything they want on Facebook. They put up on Facebook their name, where they go to school, their pets' names, their brothers and sisters' names, your names, everybody else. Regulate that. Don't let them put that stuff up. Don't let them check in at places where they're going. If they have Facebook and they like to check in, they're at Panera Bread and they're going to check in, no. They don't need to be checking in, because if I'm stalking your child or I'm a sexual predator, I know where they are at that given moment. I've gone through, I've got them to let me be friends with them, and now I know where they are. I can go grab them. And if I know where you are, I know where you're not. So if I know that they're and you are at the store, I know you're not at home, I can go break into your house. So regulate that. Don't let them check in, and you shouldn't check in either. Reputation sabotage because of inappropriate pictures or too much information, we talked about. Cyberbullying, we've covered. Predators lurking, we just talked about. Email concerns and tricks. Monitor your child's email. Now, it's a little bit tougher. You can't tell if they've deleted something out of there, but you can put a keystroke recorder on the back of the computer that will capture every password they have, everything else that's put right on the back. It's a little thumb drive that'll plug right in the back of the computer. But in addition to that, keep this in mind. If I create an email address, whatever it is, I create that email address and I share it with Christina right here, and she has it. So now we both have the same email address and we both have the password. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a draft. I'm not going to send it. I'm just going to write a draft. And then she knows to go and look at the drafts. And now I've just communicated with her saying, hey, tonight I'm going to buy 50 pounds of pot, and do you want some of it and everything else? She deletes it after she reads it, and there's no record of it. So you need to have that keystroke on the back of the device so that you can tell if they're going into other emails that you don't know about. Because you may not know they have another email account because anybody can go in and set one up. Cyberbullying, we've talked quite a bit about it, so we'll just go ahead and go to the next one. This is kind of interesting. 52% of students reported being cyberbullied. 33% have experienced cyber threats online. 25% have been bullied repeatedly through their cell phones on the internet. 52% never tell their parents when cyberbullying occurs. The dynamics we're dealing with today. And 11% have had embarrassing or damaging pictures taken of themselves without their permission, posted up on the web. Those are the dynamics we're dealing with. We talked about this with your child's digital footprint. Make sure none of this is anywhere on the internet. Their birth date, their home address, their telephone number, school name, team name, player number, any of that. It's a shame that we have to restrict that information, but you as the parent are also not only tasked with teaching them responsibility, but you're tasked with protecting them. So get all this stuff off of there. GPS. If their car has a GPS in it, don't let them program in their home address. Take it out. In fact, you should not program in your home address in your GPS either. Because if I steal your GPS out of your car while you're at the airport or while you're at school, I hit home and it takes me straight to your house. I now know where you live at. If you're going to do that, put in a store. Put in the address of a store that's near your house. If you can't find your house from there, you probably should not be driving anyway. So just keep that in mind. But don't put in your home address. Don't put in specific or important information in that. Keeping your child safe in a 24/7 world. Again, you got to be the chief law enforcement officer in your child's life. Talk to your child about what is appropriate information to share and whom to share it with. Go through privacy settings with your child. Make sure they know you have those settings in place, and make sure you password protect the computer so they can't change them. Keep an open password policy so you can monitor, check the browser history periodically. How many of you check the browser history on your computer? Go in and check it, and make sure that you keep this in mind. If it is something that is saved as a favorite, on many systems, it won't show up in the history. So in other words, if I save Facebook in my favorites, or it's an icon on the screen, and I click on Facebook, I can go in there all day long and it won't show up in the history because it's one of the favorites. So keep that in mind as you're monitoring. Don't just think because you're not seeing it or they haven't been on it that it's not there. And then again, don't let them delete text messages. All right, what can you do as a parent? Establish open lines of communication. Your child can't be scared to talk to you. There was a young lady and her baby that were abducted over in Bradenton, Florida. And I had a chance back when I was with FDLE to talk to the mom and dad. And they blamed themselves for what happened. Because even at the age of 18, when she got pregnant and she started dating a guy that she shouldn't have, they got mad at her and they wouldn't talk to her. They almost disowned her. And she had no place to turn. And when that turned even worse, when that person became even worse than they were, what happened next was she got abducted, the child got abducted, and neither of them have ever been found since. Now mom and dad are left embracing that she didn't have any place to turn. She didn't have any place to go talk to. Your kids have to know you're going to hold them accountable, but they also have to know that you are the place to turn for safety. You are the place to come and talk to them, and they need to own up. If they've done something wrong, the punishment is going to be harsh in a sense, but it's also going to be fair. And that in itself is teaching them a lesson as well. So you have to have that open communication. Encourage your child in praise and good behavior. Don't just be the parent that always talks to them when they're bad. Be there talking to them when they're good. And ideally, that's going to be the conversations you're having more than anything else. Praise them for what they do good. Our deputies, they go out, our corrections deputies, everybody else, they do amazing work. I can't pay them a lot of money. But you know what? We use our Facebook page to put up when they make a great arrest. We put up when they graduate with a master's degree or something of that nature. We are giving them positive recognition because they are doing a great job. And 99% of our kids do a great job too. So make sure you're positive reinforcing with it. Help your child solve and cope problems goes back to open lines of communication. Volunteer at your child's school and get involved in their extracurricular activities. And I say this because everything's about networking. Richard and I were talking earlier about he came to this event, got to talk to actually several people that he looks to is going to extend a partnership with and everything else, just from being here today. When you go down and you volunteer at your kid's school, you start talking to others, networking. You're talking to their teachers, you're talking to their parents, and you've opened up lines of communication that might just be the line that one parent sits with you in the lunchroom and says, hey, I need to tell you something about your kid. Or I need to tell you something that happened to my kid, and you need to think about it with your kid. Those are the open lines of communications we get from volunteering. And then plan family activities without technology involved. All right? Go out in the backyard, throw a football, play Monopoly, make them put their text messages away, make them hang their phones up, everything else. Because if you don't, you're going to lose touch with them. My wife and I just had a chance to go on vacation for a week. I turned both of my phones off, and our chief deputy had the cell phone number to my wife's cell phone. So if anything happened, he could reach out for her. But if I had my two phones on and I had them with me, I promise you, I'm going to be checking emails, I'm going to be sending text messages, I'm going to be checking voicemails, and I'm going to be playing solitaire or Words with Friends. No way around it. And I'm going to be looking at Facebook. All right? So take them away, say we're going to have family time right now. What should I do? Establish expectations and consequences. Make sure that they know if you do this, this is what happens. You're going to get, after the break, David's going to come up and talk, and then after David talks, you're going to get to see our chain gang today. And you're actually going to get to ask them any question you want. And the chain gang exists for one purpose in Brevard County. That purpose, or the primary purpose, I should say, that primary purpose is so that mom, dad, grandparent, or guardian is driving down the road with that kid in the car, and they see the chain gang on the side of the road, and it stimulates conversation that kid goes, wow, what happened to them? Why are they out there wearing chains and stripes picking up garbage? And the answer is unequivocally because they didn't do it right. That's the message. And you're going to get to talk to them today as we go through. Be a good role model. Respect, patience, and firmness is part of that. Know your child's friends, who they are, and stay involved in their friendships. Be suspicious. How many of you are automatically suspicious of your kids? If my kids are breathing, I'm wondering why. What's wrong? What happened here? All right? If they come in the house and they're breathing heavily, did you just steal something? You had to run? What's going on? Now, I'm probably the other end of the spectrum where I'm super, super paranoid. But you need to be suspicious of your kids. Suspicion is how you get answers. Cops are the most suspicious people in the world. But when we get to dealing with our kids, we sometimes forget that. We sometimes think to ourselves, my kid wouldn't do that. Every one of you thinks that too. My kid wouldn't do that, but yes, they would. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't be here for this class today. Stop believing everything they tell you is the truth, because it's not. Discipline your child and hold them accountable. Don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to do what's right. Do what's in your heart. David's going to talk to you about how to properly do it, but do what you know you have to do so that your kid is going to be a good parent down the road. Be innovative in your approach to parenting. By being innovative, you have to keep up with technology. A lot of us don't want to keep up with it, but you do. You have to be on Facebook. You have to be on all these other things, and you have to be innovative in how you approach them. All right. We are going to take about probably a 6? Oh, I thought you had up a 6 back there. I'm sorry, I couldn't see. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. We'll come back in. Assistant State Attorney David Koenig is going to say, this is what you can do, and this is what you can't do. And he's going to give you some perfect case examples. So take about 5 minutes, stretch your legs, and we'll be right back in. Pleasure to introduce to you Assistant State Attorney David Koenig, who is going to, as I said, talk to us. Ask questions. This is your time to ask the prosecutor what some of the questions you may have had when you came in, some of the things that you may have always wanted to ask, or some of the things that come up during my part of the presentation or that come up during his. So please, very informal, just feel free to ask questions, and also keep in mind at the very end, any questions you have, we will answer, and hopefully for the benefit of everybody where they can hear. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome David Koenig. David, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Ivey. Can you hear me okay? I'm not used to having a microphone, so you can hear me okay. Fair enough. Okay, very good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today, and Sheriff Ivey gave me this opportunity, and my boss, Phil Archer, gave me the opportunity. I don't know if it was so much an opportunity, he just couldn't make it, and so he said, David, you're going to do it, and you know how that works, and I'm here. So he asked me to come in and chat with you about these kind of issues because that's what I do at the State Attorney's Office. I'm the person that makes the decisions about the child abuse and actually sex crimes cases as well, which this isn't really the topic of discussion today. And so he asked me to come in and sort of fill in some of the additional supplements, some of the material, some of the great information that Sheriff Ivey gave to you. I was sitting there and taking some notes because, this is not an easy thing. That thing being parenting, right? As we speak today, just to kind of make maybe a little bit of a connection here, my son's skateboard, which he dearly loves, is sitting in the back of my truck. Okay, so you can that's trying to get you the idea that this is not just a practical in sense of my profession, but I'm a parent as well. So I have some of the same questions and concerns and recognize that it's not easy. I think the key thing is to kind of follow up on what Sheriff Ivey was saying is it's not supposed to be easy. It's an incredible responsibility that parents have. We bring kids into the world. And yes, as he pointed out, law enforcement and the Department of Children and Families and DJJ and other organizations are there to help if needed, but it's not their primary responsibility. So Sheriff Ivey was talking about, a community to raise a community, and I suppose that's true. And that old statement, it takes a village to raise a child. I guess there's some truth to that, but ultimately it's the parent more so than the village, I think, that has bears the ultimate responsibility. So I don't have all the answers, and Sheriff Ivey's had some great ideas, and I'll give you some ideas in terms of what gets people in trouble, I guess you could say, in terms of disciplining and so forth. And we can chat about that. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. What you're going to find is that a lot of the rules, if you will, some of them are not black and white, right? And because it's not a situation like, let's say, from a law enforcement point of view of making a drug arrest, right? You search somebody and he has cocaine on him or some other drug, and it field tests positive for cocaine. It is cocaine, and it was in his pocket. That's a pretty black or white kind of situation, as opposed to questions that come to me in terms of child abuse. Those are very often a much grayer area for a host of different reasons that we'll get into right now. I guess let me start off by telling you this, because people often hear, they say, well, Koenig, what do you do for a living? I'm a prosecutor. I handle the child abuse and sex crimes cases. And what do you think the normal reaction is when you tell them that? Yeah, or oh my God, they usually recoil in horror, like how could you possibly do that and sleep at night and have a family yourself and still have any hair on your head left? And of course, it's taken its toll there as well. But, the truth of the matter is, and this is why I think I can maybe share some things that might be insightful to you guys, is that most of the child abuse cases that you see, that law enforcement gets involved with and that come to the state attorney's office are parental discipline cases. Some of which are awful, and you really would recoil and say, my gosh, that's horrible. And some of which different people would have different opinions about whether or not they're a crime or not, or prosecutable or should be prosecuted and so forth. So don't get me wrong. In Brevard County, unfortunately, and everywhere, we do get, aggravated child abuse cases, broken bones and burns and intentional burnings and intentional inflictions of serious injuries and so forth. But a lot of the cases that I struggle with, and I say struggle with because if you get a kid that has a broken arm or a smashed in head or intentionally burned, that's pretty easy, and you can prove who did it, that's pretty easy. So even though they're more serious, they're a little easier. The more complicated cases, which involve a lot more dynamics and questions, legally, factually, morally, constitutionally, are some of these parental discipline cases. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the criminal aspect of it from a Florida statute point of view. We're going to talk about it in a bigger context from a constitutional point of view. We can talk about it also in the sense that sometimes, as Sheriff Ivey alluded to earlier, there's this other organization besides maybe a law enforcement officer that might come to your house, right? If somebody calls them or the school calls them because your child went to school with a bruise on part of his body or something. What organization is that? Yeah, DCF might get involved too. So we can talk about the distinctions there and those types of issues we can talk about. And please ask me questions as we're going on. It's a small enough audience. I think we can have a good interactive conversation here. Let me start by telling you this. So I was given a talk a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, at Florida Tech down in Melbourne, the university down there. And it was to a group of students, a small group of students who were in a child advocacy program or something. And one of the young ladies who was in there, we're talking about child abuse cases and parental discipline and physical discipline. And she was on a basketball scholarship at Florida Tech, and she was from Sweden. Okay? So obviously, Sweden's not the United States. They have a different, I'm sure it's a wonderful country, but they have a different country. And we were talking about, and she was explaining how she had heard from some of her teammates who were Americans, how they would talk about getting, spanked, and I'll use the word beat. That probably may not be the most appropriate word, and she was flabbergasted. And even when I was talking to her about the fact that you can spank your child in Florida as long as it's reasonable and not excessive, she, was kind of shocked at that and was expressing her shock and explaining that how in Sweden that's not the case because, it's a different kind of country and they may have really institutionalized this. It takes a village to raise a child concept, and they may not have as many parental rights in terms of disciplining their child and so forth. So I think that was just a good way to point out that, this country is different in a lot of respects. And one of the things that makes it different is what? What's that founding document that I know Sheriff Ivey talks about a lot in terms of the way he operates his whole entire agency, and certainly as a prosecutor you're mindful of, but it impacts parents. What's that founding document we're talking about? A lot of people have been talking about it lately in this country. The Constitution, that's right. So people have been talking, you've been here and been watching the news lately, people been talking a little bit about the Constitution and the government's relationship to the people and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot more today and in the last few years than when I was growing up, certainly. So one of the things that's important is, if you know anything about the Constitution, even without being a legal scholar, and I'm certainly not, but the basic idea, right, is that the government is all powerful or limited. Limited. That's the underlying premise behind the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and so forth. And so there's certain things in the Constitution that are explicitly stated, right, in terms of your rights, right? Like the First Amendment, right, which is the right to what? Free speech, right? The Second Amendment, right to bear arms. The Fourth Amendment, to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. And these critically important things that are explicitly stated in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. There's certain things that are not explicitly stated, but the courts, particularly the Supreme Court, has said it's a fundamental right, okay? So one of those, for example, would be privacy. The Supreme Court has said privacy is an important fundamental right, even though it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution. So as it relates to our conversation today, what do you think might be another thing that the Supreme Court in several cases has said is a fundamental right in the Constitution? We're talking about it today, so... Yeah, parental rights is a fundamental right in the Constitution, basically. When I say parental rights, a parental right to the care, custody, control, and basically upbringing of their child. So when we're looking at these cases, when I look at these cases as a prosecutor who has to be the representative of the government to make the decision about whether somebody is going to be prosecuted for it and become potentially a convicted felon as a child abuser, that's the context I look at this thing in. And to a lesser extent, and we'll talk about some of the differences between law enforcement and the prosecution role, that's what Sheriff Ivey's deputies and the other law enforcement are looking at it as well, or at least they should be, right? Because that's the founding, that's the big one, right? The U.S. Constitution is the big document, and there is a fundamental right to raise your children as you see fit, within limits, okay? So we talked about some of those other rights, First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment. So when you have a freedom of speech, right, this is the famous one, does that mean you have unlimited freedom of speech? No, the famous one is you can't yell fire in a what? In a movie theater, in a crowded theater, right? So similarly, Second Amendment, we have a right to bear arms, right? That shall not be infringed, but the courts have, over time, including in the Heller decision and other Supreme Court decisions, have said basically, well, you have right to bear arms is to be not infringed, but if you're a convicted felon, you can't own a firearm. The states can create, certain concealed weapons laws and stuff like that. So there are limits. So similarly, with respect to raising your children, there are some limits, right? And so the states have enacted statutes and laws and so forth that limit the ability of a parent to raise their children. So, I mean, just because you've got a fundamental right to raise your children any way you want doesn't mean that if you have a 2-year-old that you're trying to toilet train, that you can, beat them from head to toe until they're black and blue and seriously injure them because they're not, getting to the toilet in time or something like that. So there's limits to everything, and that's one of the things we'll talk about as we go forward. But I wanted to kind of frame the whole thing as I was talking to Sheriff Ivey earlier in the concept that there is this fundamental right to raise your children as you see fit, which is how it should be, and is not necessarily the case everywhere, right? As an example of that situation in Sweden. So let's break this down a little bit, and we can talk about some particulars here. One of the things that comes up a lot is this concept of physical discipline or corporal discipline and spanking your children and so forth. So the thing is that the general rule, right, the basic concept is that a parent can put their hands on their kid even if the kid doesn't want the parent's hands on them, so to speak, to restrain them, to spank them, and so forth. Or to hug them or to kiss them, right? My teenager, I try to grab him and give him a kiss, and he, of course, retracts, and we laugh about it. But anyway, and the key concept here is going to be this concept of reasonableness. And so I'm just going to give you, I'm not trying to bore you to death with the whole legal analysis of it or make you legal scholars about it, but I'll give you the basics of it. The basic child abuse statute in Florida says you can't intentionally inflict physical or mental injury on a child, okay, or do some act which reasonably is likely to cause physical or mental injury in a child. So, if you're a deputy and you respond to a scene, that's what you have to deal with. And of course, you've got to make some decisions pretty quickly, unlike my luxury, which is I can get the case 2 weeks later. Everybody's now calmed down. The adrenaline's not pumping anymore. People are sober, right? Some of the witnesses perhaps. The kids maybe don't have as much of a motivation sometimes to tell their parent, tell things that perhaps aren't true if that's the case. So it's a different framework, between the responding officer and the prosecutor. That's why sometimes cases result in different outcomes just because you get arrested. But that's what they're looking at. So an intentional infliction of physical injury, that's what the statute says. So when you break that down, you have to say, okay, well, so in other words, let's take one part of it. It's an intentional infliction of physical or mental injury. I can tell you that in doing this for many years, I've never seen a case come in that was a child abuse for mental injury, okay? Because you can kind of see how those floodgates would open, and anytime you'd say that the kid was upset or not happy or, was not the best parenting decision or whatever, that could be criminal, that would certainly open up a lot of floodgates. So intentional infliction of physical injury is sort of what you focus on. And so first of all, it has to be intentional, right? You have to prove the parent intended to injure the child. And it has to be an injury, which equates to harm. And so there's in the DCF statute, there's a whole list of things that constitute harm, talking about, subdural hematomas and spinal injuries and broken bones. But it also does say significant bruising and welts, okay? Which is usually the close calls. Now, when I say close calls, that's because, what's significant to one person may be not that significant to another person. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is there's a lot of gray area there, which all of you are probably disappointed in saying, oh my gosh, I thought we were going to be able to walk out of here and you're going to be able to tell me exactly how hard I can hit my kid on exactly what part of his body using exactly what kind of instrument. So I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not going to be able to do that. And that's what makes, the deputy's job and the police officer's job so difficult, because they don't have a guidebook. I'm just here to tell you right now. There is no guidebook in the Metro-Dade police handbook or in any other police handbook that has photographs that say, okay, well, if this injury is a little redder than this injury, then that's going to be a crime, etc. Or a matrix that says, well, if the injury is on, the upper part of the thigh and not directly on the buttocks, that's criminal. They don't have that luxury, so they have to do the best they can based on what they know about the statute, and sometimes based on their personal experiences and also on what they're encountering, okay? So there are times when people go to jail for things that ultimately they don't get prosecuted for. And why is that? Well, the police officer has to go out there. How does he get? Well, let's start with how he gets there in the first place. Well, he gets there a number of ways. Oftentimes, when the Department of Children and Families gets called by somebody called a mandatory reporter. So a school teacher or a friend calls the abuse hotline and the DCF protective investigator goes out there. They often, if not always, take a police officer with them. Sometimes the case results in nothing. Sometimes the case results in the Department of Children and Families instituting their own action, right? And what can they do? Well, they can remove children, they can shelter them, they can make the parents do a dependency case plan. Ultimately, if the parents don't comply with this dependency case plan and they're just other issues and maybe a long history of it, they can even a dependency judge through DCF can terminate their parental rights. So sometimes that happens independent of the criminal case, but if there's a deputy or an officer show up, an investigation happens and the person very well might go to jail. So I get the case, and what do I look at? Well, I look at a number of things. And hopefully and probably most police officers have looked at the same things in making their determination. I'm looking at, okay, how old is the child? That's a big deal for me, right? If I've got a 2-year-old in diapers that's got some type of injury to him over his back or something, let's say, versus a 15-year-old, that's going to make a big difference. So age is going to be a big difference because we all know that toddlers and infants and so forth are going to be a lot more vulnerable than a 15-year-old. And the other question is going to be a lot of this. Remember, what's the R word I used before? That overrides a lot of this reasonableness, right? So in terms of reasonable discipline, so a lot of this is going to have to do with, okay, well, how is it reasonable, to be beating the 2-year-old who's not going to get that discipline? There's not going to be that connect there because they're only 2, versus the 15-year-old who cusses his mother and gets slapped in the face. They're going to understand that. They're going to understand that and make that connection between that. Where am I at? Am I good? Okay. So age is one. The severity of the injuries is of course important, right? So I mean, you've heard it said, and police officers and DCF workers and parents have heard this for years. They say, well, you can discipline your kids, but you can't leave a red mark. You can't use an instrument beside your hand. It has to be in the buttocks. And then this is one of my favorite ones. You can't be angry when you're doing it, right? So I don't know. My wife wishes I'd spanked my son much more than I did, but the few times that I did, I can tell you, and I guess I'm saying it to the camera, I was angry when I did it. So those things, there's nothing in the law that says that, right? There's nothing in the law that says it's got to be in the butt, that you can't leave a mark, and that it's got to be when you're calm, okay? Certainly those things can be incorporated into a decision whether somebody goes to jail, whether they're prosecuted. I mean, if the kid is sleeping in the bed and the father comes home and he's drunk and the kid's sleeping and the father begins to beat him, then it's going to be very hard to justify that was reasonable discipline when the child was sleeping and the father was intoxicated. Similarly, with respect to marks and bruises and stuff, it's also tough, right? Because we all know as adults that different people bruise differently. So you can't just judge it based on this mark is a little more bruised than this mark is, because everybody's skin reacts differently, and some people are darker complected than others, and so it's going to be more difficult to see the bruise. So you can't just look at that. So what else do I look at? So one of the luxuries I have in terms of doing that is I have the luxury of talking to people after the fact, a week after, 2 weeks after, and so forth, and talking to the kid, and talking to the other spouse sometimes, and talking to the police officer that made the arrest, talking to the DCF worker. And so I get all this information together, and here's how I look at it. In that framework I told you before, I look at it and I say, okay, I may not agree, and a lot of other parents may not agree to how this particular child was disciplined, but does that mean I should, as a representative of the government, say, okay, you're a child abuser and you're going to stay in jail or be prosecuted for it? And so my sort of philosophy on it is that there has to be a compelling reason, right? Even if I disagree with it, even if different people could disagree with it, there has to be a pretty compelling reason for the government to come in and say you're a child abuser and you should be prosecuted for it and stay in jail or what have you. So I guess the take-home message with that is that corporal discipline is allowed in Florida. We talked about the statute a little bit. Let's say the case goes forward. One of the things as a prosecutor you're always looking at is what is the jury instruction? In other words, what if the case actually went to court and went to trial? What would the judge tell the jury that they have to, the criteria they have to use to convict somebody? And I think it's interesting and important to note that in Florida, the jury instruction says, so this is what the judge would read the jury in a child abuse case, that it's not a crime in the state of Florida for a parent to exercise reasonable physical discipline on a child, even if there is an injury, okay? The key word there, we see that R word again, right? What's that R word? Reasonable and non-excessive, okay? So the other legal place that lawyers look for, guidance is the courts and the appellate courts who write these decisions about these different cases. And so one case, I'll just give you an example of a case where the appellate court said, no, this was not appropriate legal discipline, or physical discipline, I should say, and affirmed I think it was the father's conviction for child abuse was an appellate case, and the facts basically were a child who was 7, that's important right there, right? So he's not 17, he's 7, was beat with a belt that had metal grommets on it or something, and so the testimony in the case report or in the case law was that the child's back was filled with with bruising and had the imprints of the belt on it, and it was a medical doctor who explained how that was significant and so forth. So the court basically said there that that was not your typical spanking, and basically affirmed the concept that a typical spanking is not going to be against the law. So it's not automatically against the law that he used a belt, but under those circumstances, the fact that the kid had these injuries on him, the fact that it was not on his buttocks, it was on his back, the fact that he was 7, the fact that there was multiple strikes on it, led him to be arrested, A, to be prosecuted, B, and then the conviction, the jury to convict him, C, and then ultimately it was affirmed. So I'm just trying to give you some parameters of cases where that have gone all the way and been affirmed by the courts as truly being child abuse. The other, any questions about that, about physical discipline? That question comes up a lot. So I guess the bottom line is, in Florida, you are allowed to physically discipline your kid as long as it's reasonable and not excessive. And there's some different parameters or different variables that the prosecutor and law enforcement and the courts look at. Yes, ma'am.
How far can you go to
Sure.
the
Well, I think you can. I think that I don't think that there's a non-existent self-defense law for parents as it relates to their children. Yes, ma'am. Her question was, how far can parents go in a self-defense mode if they're attacked essentially by their children, right? So again, there's not a exclusion for parents to be exercise self-defense when they're being attacked by their children. So I think you can do what you need to do to protect yourself. And how that's all going to shake out, I don't know. It's going to depend on how, it's going to be. So let's say you defend yourself and you end up punching your son in the face, okay? And that's going to get investigated, and hopefully the investigator will take statements from everybody and make a determination about, who was in the right and who was in the wrong. A lot of times those situations are very fluid for law enforcement. They really are not sure because people are not maybe completely coherent, and maybe the child is not telling the truth, and those work out from a arrest point of view in a lot of different ways. A lot of different people go to jail for different things, depends on what the physical evidence is and so forth. And the hope is that, at some point, that's why there's kind of a multi-step process. Even if the law enforcement officer has to make a decision, because they have to make it right then, right? They're walking into what they consider a domestic violence situation, which the concept is that if they've got a domestic violence situation, somebody's going to jail for protection of the victim. And so when I get the case, or somebody like me, hopefully we can talk to people and talk to the police officer, get their input, and make a decision that doesn't have to be made immediately with a little more thought. I don't know if I've answered your question, but the bottom line is you don't have to take a beating, is what I'm saying. You can defend yourself just like in any other type of situation. Okay, so the other thing that comes up a lot of times with respect to, wrap it up. Okay, very good. The other thing I want to tell you is a couple more quick points as I wrap it up. So in addition to the physical discipline aspect of it, a lot of people were talking to me and have asked me about property questions, right? And as I told you, my son skateboards in my car as we speak. So there's case law out there, and that controls, because I didn't find any statutes on, that a parent, as it relates to the son's property rights. And how I read the case law in the state of Florida is that parental rights override a kid's property rights. So I'm not saying a kid doesn't have any property rights, but I think the parents' rights override that. And so why do I say that? Well, in particular, there's a case where a police officer wanted to search a teenager's room. And the teenager, because they thought he had guns or drugs in there or something, and the teenager was protesting and objecting to the police officer. And the parent said, no, Mr. Police Officer, you can go in and search the room, and sure enough, they found some stuff. And the appellate court, again, said no, the parental rights, which are embodied as a fundamental right in the Constitution, override that child's property rights. So that's what I wanted to talk about. It sounds like my time is up. There's an interesting website, just to kind of go back to that whole concept to wrap it up in terms of that young lady I met from Sweden. It's called parentalrights.org, and it has some interesting things on there to read about. And one of the things they're trying to do, and I'm not promoting it, I'm just telling you for information purposes, is they're trying to get past a U.S. constitutional amendment to remember we talked about that parental rights is a fundamental but implied right. They're trying to make it a fundamental explicit right in the U.S. Constitution, because there's other powers that be in terms of the United Nations conventions and so forth that want to limit, as I understand it, read it from this website, read it for yourself, draw your own conclusions, that want to limit a parent's rights, maybe like what I learned from that young lady in Sweden. Parentalrights.org is the name of it. And I'll be here with Sheriff Ivey and happy to talk to you some more, but I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
I will share with you, and I hope our state attorney doesn't mind me saying this, but not only did David volunteer to come here and be a part of this, but he's also one of the finalists for one of our new county's judge positions that's up, and I'll be going up for an interview with the governor. So very well respected in his profession, does a great job for us.
Thanks, sir.
All right, at this time, we are going to go to immediately the third phase so we can stay on course, get you out of here as we promised on time. I'm going to ask that you keep your seats for the next little bit of this as this starts to take place. Our team is going to be handing out some cards for you. If you have questions, we actually have some questions that we as all of our crime prevention team and myself as parents would want to ask if we were sitting in your seats. But you ask any question you want to ask, and the young men that are about to come up here will be more than happy to answer it. If you will, once you get your card, just pass it back to the aisle, and we'll collect them and get them to our moderator. Our moderator is going to be Lieutenant Mike Scully. He's the head of our crime prevention unit. He is going to moderate and ask the questions. But please, this is your chance to ask questions from some people that have experienced this, have felt it, have experienced it, have seen what their families have gone through and everything else. So with that, I'll ask our production team to start bringing them in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the Brevard County Jail Chain Gang. And each one of the members of our chain gang is a volunteer. They volunteer to be part of the chain gang for any number of reasons. And they've agreed to come and speak today to share with you their story. We felt that their story, many of them are quite compelling, would be of value to you and to your children going forward. So we're going to start by asking each of the members of our chain gang why they are currently in jail and what their current sentence is.
My sentence is 9 months, and I'm in here for a violation of probation. And last name is Martinez.
What was the original charge?
Original charge was possession intent to sell.
My name's Noto, and I've been sentenced to a year in the county, and I'm in here for trafficking and stolen property.
My name is Atkinson. I'm here on petty theft and organized fraud. I was stealing to support a drug habit, and I'm here for 9 months.
My name's Wells. I'm here for grand theft and dealing in stolen property. My sentence was 8.5 months. I also am on violation of probation for that charge. And I was also supporting a drug habit.
My name's Sanders. I'm in here for trafficking and stolen property, grand theft. I got sentenced 9 months. I was stealing for a drug habit as well.
My name is Cole. I'm here on driving suspended and violation of probation and 160 days.
My name is Weststein. I'm here for writing bad checks to support a drug habit. I got sentenced to about 364 days.
My name is Brooks. I'm here on a technical violation. I'm sentenced to a year in the county.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to ask each and every one of you, first, before we get started on the questions, our team is going to be passing out some question cards so that each of the members of the audience can pose questions to the chain gang or to pose a question to the sheriff. Just please write your questions on the card, and a member of our team will pick those questions up. While we're in the process of developing those questions and picking them up, we do have some questions that we wanted to direct to the chain gang and we think would be of value to you going forward. So first of all, gentlemen, each of you, how many times have you been arrested?
My name is Brooks. I've been arrested 3 times.
My name is Weststein. I've been arrested about 7 or 8 times.
I believe about 70.
7-0?
70.
Okay.
My name is Sanders, about 20.
My name is Wells. Roughly 4 or 5 times.
Atkinson, and probably 10 or 15 times.
Noto, about 8 times.
Martinez, 10 times.
Okay, and one more question for each one of you. It's important to know how many of you would say that your current situation, for what you're in jail for right now or for what led you to jail, was that a result of a substance abuse problem, either drug or alcohol?
Well, my current situation led me, I would say it was a drug problem, following the wrong crowd, selling drugs. That led to me being in the position that I'm in now.
My situation is mostly alcohol mixed with drugs, following the wrong people.
Yeah, I'd say drugs.
Yes, drugs. Started with alcohol, led to drugs.
I started with smoking pot, then it led to bigger drugs. So, it started all with drugs, hanging out with the wrong crowd, doing the wrong thing, just rebelled against my family, and here I am.
I've struggled with a substance abuse since I've been about 18, so yeah, that's what led me to get it into jail.
My situation is I didn't have much guidance. I basically was allowed to do whatever I wanted, and that's what I did. I just did whatever I wanted. I got into drugs and dropped out of school, and ended up here.
Yeah, drugs and alcohol.
Okay, to the inmate who said that they had been in jail 70 times. 70 times. How much total time have you spent in jail and or prison? How much of your life have you spent in jail?
Most of it was just like weekends over in county, but there was a 2-year prison sentence.
Okay, so cumulative of 70 arrests, 2 years in prison.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we've identified 2 particular members of our chain gang that had compelling stories that we want to direct some questions to. First, Mr. Martinez, how grateful are you to have this opportunity to share your story in helping your rehabilitation and your recovery?
Feel real good about it. You know, helping Brevard County. I've been in Titusville 27 years, and I like Brevard County. You know, if I can help out, and the chain gang is good for it.
Thank you. And same question to our other spokesperson.
Do you mind asking it one more time?
Sure, that is, how grateful are you to have this opportunity as a member of our chain gang to share your story, your situation, to help the next generation, to help with your recovery and your rehabilitation?
I'm thankful for it. It's a good thing. If we can keep 1 or 2, it doesn't matter a number. If we can keep any kid out of this facility and off of that path, it'd be the best thing that's happened. You know, the chain gang, we're coming out here today to talk to the parents, to give them a brief of what they could do and not do to help their children. My best thing was, be there for your kids and listen to them. I'm thankful for it.
Okay, let me ask you a follow-up question on that, and that is this. Do you feel that your parents did everything they could to love and support you before you got into trouble?
I feel there could have been a few things done differently, but every opinion varies. My mom, it was just my mom there. I didn't have my father. She did everything that I feel that could have been to the best of her ability. As a single mother, she did it all the best she could. And there's a lot of things that you need a father there for too, but I feel, my mom did the best she could. And a few things could have been done differently.
So what are those things that she could have done as a single mother? What could your single mother have done differently to help keep you on that correct path?
I guess there's a few ways to look at it. I feel I'd rather had her there more, but she had to work to support us, me and my 2 brothers and little sister. I just felt like she wasn't there enough. She tried to be my friend as well as my parent, but being the parent comes first, and she was trying to be my friend more, so I took leniency to that and felt like I could get away with whatever I wanted to because she was my friend more than she was my parent at sometimes. And just to been there, listen, opened up, But like I said, she worked a lot, so I can understand not being there all the time. But the time she was there, she was a dedicated mother.
Okay, here's a great question from a member of the audience, and it says, firstly, thank you for being here to speak with us. It is important to our community what you're doing. Have any of you stolen from family or friends, and how did that make them feel?
I personally have, yes, and it's disappointing to them, and it's heartbreaking to them. My mom, she was destroyed when I took from her. She had that open relationship and trust, and I crushed it by taking from her, and she would have given me anything I needed. Yeah, we always didn't have great benefits, and the pluses. We had the necessities. We always had necessities, and the little extras that we had, we were thankful for. But it got to the point where, again, I was running around with the wrong crowd, and they had more than what I had. They were buying. It started when I was younger. They were buying the good candy bars at school. And I went in and I'd find the change bucket because I wanted to. And they were always telling me this is how we get it, so I would go do that. And from there on out, it just progressively got worse. But again, I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, but it crushed her when I took from her.
Okay, Mr. Wells, answer the same question. Have you ever stolen from a family or friend, and how did that make them feel?
Sir, I am Mr. Wells.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Martinez, I'm sorry.
No, I never stole from my parents.
Okay.
And I never stole from my aunt.
Okay.
I just, like he was saying, I'm from the old school, so more of my parents weren't very open-minded. It was more, let's pull out the belt. I just wish they were just a little bit more open-minded and listened because of the way things change. But no, I never stole from my parents.
Okay, anyone else have a comment? Any of the other members of the chain gang want to answer that question for us? You don't need to stand up. You guys can remain seated.
Okay, my name's Sanders. I absolutely stole from my guardian. My grandfather raised me. My parents were never there when the drugs got out of control. It started with alcohol when I was about 16. He just would believe anything I said. I was lying to him. And then it got to the point I was stealing. And then, when he found out I was stealing, it was heartbreaking to him. You could see it, and he just wasn't prepared for anything like that. So.
All right, here's a kind of a spin in a different direction, and that is, how many of you had the opportunity to play high school sports? Okay, show of hands. Okay, how many of you had the true talent and the potential to excel beyond high school level sports to maybe a collegiate level, go to college on a scholarship? How many of you were able to do that? Okay, very good. You want to tell us just a little bit about your opportunity and how that worked out for you?
Yes, sir. I was in high school, good at basketball, didn't play football much. Was good at soccer also at Merritt Island High and Rockledge High School. And you don't have to necessarily be a career criminal to get in here. It can make petty, simple mistakes to get you in here. I didn't really get in trouble much. Just made a few poor bad decisions, and it ended me up in a place like this. You know what I'm saying? Making the wrong decisions can you can be either here or there in the blink of an eye, and you're here where somebody has to tell you what to do and when to do it. It's lack of freedom in here.
All right, this is a question that I'm convinced has come from one of our teachers in the audience, but it's a great question. And that is, what can our teachers do to try and redirect a student that appears to be going in that wrong direction? Is there anything that any of the teachers that you had in your life could have done or maybe should have done to help you be more successful in school or to stay on that straight path?
Well, I could say actually my teachers were, they were that helping hand that helped me out. Really, it was me that made my own decisions. You know what I'm saying? My teachers, they tried all they could and they could do. You know what I mean? And I made that decision to do this or to do that. It all depends on what you can do and what is that parent is there monitoring their kids and watching what they're doing. You know what I mean? You can't make them do this, you can't make them do that, but monitoring them can also help them too. You know what I mean? That's a lot.
Anybody else want to answer that question?
I think a teacher just should look out for the signs of a child leading astray, like who they're hanging out with and their behavior changing and whatnot. I had the same thing happen to my daughter, so it's just pay attention, be mindful. That's about all I can add to that.
Okay. And the question is, why did you repeat doing the wrong thing after you were arrested the first time? Was there any deterrent to your first arrest? And why was there no deterrent? Who wants to feel that?
I can appeal that. It wasn't no deterrent, really. Like as I was saying, you don't have to necessarily be a career criminal to be in jail. It takes the simple and smallest things to get you in here. Like I'm in here on a technical violation 5 years ago, and I got my life right. I've been in Georgia getting together, and I came and turned myself in to deal with past history, and now I'm facing the facts. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, you don't have to necessarily be a bad person to get you in here. It's the little simple things.
Okay, so you're here on a technical violation from
Yes,
a
sir.
criminal charge 5 years ago.
Yes, sir.
What that means is that there was some term that the judge or the court or the state attorney placed upon him at sentencing that he violated that term from an original charge and original arrest 5 years ago. That's a technical violation, and that's why he's here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, second arrest. Why do you keep doing what you're doing? Someone other than you.
Well, it starts to get easy. You get used to doing that. You get used to that lifestyle, and you actually, the more times you come to jail, the more times you get comfortable being in jail, and it starts being nothing to you. It's not a good lifestyle, and the only thing I could tell some of you guys, like some of you parents out there, is encourage your kids to do good. Like, don't down them. If they look like they got something on their mind, try to get it out of them. Listen to them, and like I said, you start getting comfortable in here, and it's not good. It's not fun. It's definitely not fun in here. Nothing like home.
I'd like to ask the inmate who has 70 arrests, approximately 70 arrests. What is it that you keep doing that you keep getting arrested for, and why do you keep doing this? That's caused 70 trips to jail.
Well, all of these were when I was younger, and they were from drinking. Most of them were for drinking and pot.
Okay, so it was a lifestyle choice. You
Yeah, at
chose?
that time, but I've had kids since then.
Okay. Very good. Okay, one member of the chain gang said that a family member wasn't prepared to handle your actions. This is a very painful topic. What can we do to prepare?
Look for the signs. I started to rebel, stay away from my grandfather as much as I could, being around the people that I was being around and just doing wrong. Just notice your child not coming around and talking to you as much, trying to avoid you as much as possible. That's what happened to me.
Okay, and I'm actually going to ask this next question to each one of you, so just pass the microphone down if you could. But what guidance, what advice would you give to the parents that are in the audience today to help keep their child on the right path? What one piece of advice or guidance can you give to our parents that are here today?
Listen to your kid. Just let him talk to you.
Just watch for signs. Be open. Be more loving. You know, if you feel like you're not there, you know, just try to reach out.
Two of the biggest things that I can think of right offhand is pay attention to who they're hanging out with and monitor that computer, cell phones, whatever. I mean, you don't have to be overwhelming, but you do have to pay attention. Be mindful of what your child's doing.
Be their parent, not their friend. It comes first. You can be as strict as you want, but it's not always going to work to be on top of them constantly, or hounding them. You know, yeah, everybody, you need that self-control in their life to be on top of them, but just don't crack down on them too hard because they will rebel. Be there, listen, open up to them. Don't portray yourself out to be perfect either. Don't give them guidelines to live by unless you can live by them too. In a sense, don't be hypocritical. You can't tell them, don't go smoke cigarettes, and you're sitting there smoking in front of them. You can't tell them to go clean their room, but when they peek in your door, your room's messy. You can give your kids guidelines, but you got to live by them as well. It's pretty much just open up to them, listen to them, pay attention to their attitude. They see you see, and most parents think that a kid's changing just because they're going through, the cycle of life. They're going through their teens, they're going to high school. They're not going to want to have as much to do with you because of their surroundings at school. A kid's not going to change at home because of the way it is at school unless he's following a wrong crowd. I guess I never really changed at home. I always was still open with my mom, tried the best I could, but she wasn't there, So be there. Just be there for your kids, and you can be their friend. I'm not saying not be their friend. The friendship helps, but being a parent always comes first.
I would say love them. Let them know that they're important. Always remind them that. Stay involved in their lives, in school, sports. My parents were never there. They had no idea what was going on in my school, my sports, none of that. I played sports all my life. They were never at any of my games. Their friends, get to know their friends, their so-called friends that they say that they have, get to know them. Stay involved, bring their awareness up on the drugs and alcohol. Bring their awareness up on it.
I'd say be a role model or lead by example.
I'd say just keep an eye on who their friends are. I pretty much was allowed to do whatever I wanted, hang out with whoever I wanted.
Pretty much what everybody else said, monitoring them and who they with. But also you want, like as Wells was saying, know your place as your parent and your friend. You don't have to not be their friend, but know that you're the parent above the friend.
Great advice, gentlemen. Thank you. This is a question that I'd actually like to. This was a question that I had, but I didn't come up with this. Somebody else did. But that is, what is your current age? How old are you right now? And how old were you when you were arrested for the very first time? All the way down the line.
Well, I'm 26. I'll be 27 next month. And the first time I got in trouble, I was 18.
I'm 35. The first time I got arrested was when I was 30.
I'm 42, and I think I was about 15.
31. I was arrested at the age 18, DUI.
22. I was arrested my first time when I was 18, almost 19, and once a year since then.
I'm 43, and I was arrested for the first time when I was 18 years old.
I'm 20 years old, and first time I was arrested when I was 16, and it was for a robbery.
37, and first time I was 18, driving on suspended.
Okay, here's a little bit of a follow-up question, and that is, okay, we know how old you were the first time you were arrested. How old were you the first time that you got into trouble? Not necessarily arrested, but got in your first jam or first got in trouble.
When I was 15 years old. I was hanging out with some buddies.
Pull the mic a little bit closer to you, if you would.
I was 15 years old. I was hanging out with some friends of mine. Well, I thought were friends of mine. And they had stole a couple beers from their dad. And we took them out on the four-wheelers, drinking them. And we were riding down a main road. And had a friend of mine on the back of the four-wheeler, and I was drinking and driving. And thought it'd be cool, to pop it up on two tires. And a buddy of mine fell off. And he was hurt real bad, and I got detained. I wasn't arrested. I got detained and questioned, and that.
Okay. Anybody else want to answer that question? We know how old you were when you were arrested.
Yeah.
How old were you when you got in your first jam?
Well, I was still at 18, but my parents were very supportive of me. Um, I didn't have a bad childhood, so it's hard for me to relate to the. It's it's uh it's just a snowball effect once you get arrested, though, and once you get into trouble. Period. So once you start getting into trouble, if you get in trouble early teens, it's hard to get out. It's just hard to get out of that mode. I can get away with it kind of thing. So after I got into trouble the first time at 18, it became easier and easier. It just snowballs, continues on.
All right. One of the members of our audience was particularly moved when you all came into the room. And the comment was, I can't imagine my son being in that lineup, sitting on that stage, telling their story. What is your relationship with your parents now?
Well, my parents passed away when I was young, so my aunt and uncle raised me. And it's pretty good with my aunt and uncle, the relationship.
My parents got separated when I was about 12, 13 years old. And I mean, I still got a good relationship with both of them, but a lot of the things I went through, I blame my parents for, and it wasn't really their fault. It was my choices. And I'm just now starting to get their trust back and their love back and everything. I kind of went astray for a while, but it's getting better.
Yeah, my mother is very supportive. My father is awfully bitter because, like in the past, I have stolen things from my parents to support habits and whatnot. So it's going to take a very long time to. My dad's old school, so it's going to take a very long time for me to earn that trust back. I don't even talk to my brother, my grandparents. I still get, they're supportive, but it's just going through life through insanity, expecting different results. It's hard for, I've alienated myself from my family. So it's my own fault, my own doing.
My mom's real supportive when I'm doing the right thing. When it comes to the bad stuff, of course not. She's always been there, so she's never turned her back on me. She won't stick out a helping hand when I'm trying to make drug money or something like that. She won't let me cut her grass when she knows I'm going to do wrong with the money. And our relationship's good when I'm not doing wrong. I don't know how to put it, but she's real supportive. But we have a good relationship. My dad, of course, he passed away when I was younger. Kind of lost sight of the question.
Okay, you've answered the question.
The relationship between my parents is not good. My dad's still in prison. I never really had a relationship with my mom and dad, growing up at all. My grandfather just passed away, so my dad's in prison, my mother's in Alabama. There's really no more relationship, not right now at least.
Were you raised by your parents or were you raised by your grandparents?
I was raised by my grandfather.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a good relationship with my mom, and my father is deceased. He died about 11 years ago.
I still have a pretty good relationship with both my parents.
Yes, I have a lovely relationship with both of my parents and my grandparents.
Excellent. All right, just show of hands. How many of you have a high school diploma? How many of you do not have a high school diploma? Thank you. All right, next question. Pretty relevant considering where we are. How many of you attended church regularly while you were growing up? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I did. I was, like I said, I spent a great deal of time with my grandparents. You know, I was raised by my mom, and I seen my dad a lot. But a lot of times, a lot of the weekends, my grandparents that was in my life a lot, and my grandfather is a preacher of a great church like this on Merritt Island, and so it was we had to go, you know, every Sunday and Wednesdays, and you know, I was brought up in the church, so you know, sometimes, as I was saying, it does matter who you when you monitoring your kids and who they with, because you know, just a little simple stray away, and you could be in a place like this for simple things. You know what I'm saying?
Here's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people would ask, and that is, for those of you that have a substance abuse problem, either drugs or alcohol, what one thing led you?
2005, I got into a motorcycle wreck, and I got addicted to pills because I almost died. I got addicted to painkillers, and painkillers are definitely an epidemic here in the state of Florida. That's for sure. And it just after that, I just was stealing to support my drug habit. I lost my job. I've been plumbing for all my life. It destroys a person, destroys everything good about you.
With me, it was more curiosity than anything. I wasn't really told about any drugs or anything like that. My family, nobody in my family does drugs. I was the only one who started to, and it was just, I wonder what this would do to me. I was never told about them. Nobody in my family experienced them, so they really couldn't tell me about them. And if you as parents can't tell you about them, find someone who can tell your kids about them. Because I had no idea what they would do, and once I started them, it's hard to stop.
Anybody else want to answer that question? Okay. Next question. And I'd actually like to hear an answer from each one of you on this, and that is, who do you blame for your current difficulties?
Well, me, I blame myself. You know, I'm a grown man. I know what's going on. You know, I blame myself. It's nobody's fault. You know, my parents, I had a good life. I had a good bringing up. So it was just me making poor decisions. That's all that is.
I blame myself too. No, there's nobody you can blame. Parents did a good job. Aunt and uncle did a good job. It was all me.
There really isn't anybody to blame but yourself. You make your own decisions. Parents are there to just guide you in the right place. I mean, there's only so much a parent can do. There's wrong and right things, but you can't make it perfect. You make your own decisions no matter what.
I take accountability for my actions now. It was myself, but when you're in the midst of using, you know, and whatnot, you find everybody and everything to blame it on while you're using. So when you have a clear head, you take accountability for your actions. I do myself anyways, and I don't blame anybody else but myself.
That's pretty much it. Can't blame anybody but yourself. You make your own decisions. You know right from wrong, but it'll be a good helping hand in your child's life to help teach him right from wrong and live by what you teach him or teach him or her. You know.
I blame myself. I just had no idea how serious it would be. I had no idea. You know, so I do take accountability for what I did. I knew right from wrong. Just had no idea the consequences and how serious it would be.
Myself. I blame myself. I just made the wrong decisions.
Okay, here's a great question. And that is, first of all, gentlemen from the audience, thank you for being here. But the question is, were you spanked as a child?
Absolutely.
Yes, I was. Disciplined.
I was spanked with the belt.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Every once in a great while I was, but yes, I was.
I was never touched by my parents a day in my life. My mom was abused as a child and didn't believe in spankings or hitting or anything, so I've never been spanked. Nothing.
Yes, I was.
Okay, has your jail time given you the ability to make change in your life? And I'd like to ask that question to Mr. Wells. And are you planning, when you get out of jail, what are you planning to bring? What is that change going to be in your life?
What was the first part again, sir?
Okay, the time that you've spent in jail has given you the opportunity to plan for change. What is your plan for change as you transition from jail back into the community?
I'd like to go back, and I plan on, going and being with my family, surrounding myself with good people, majoritize with just my family at first, because I haven't been here very long. I've been in here 6 going on 7 months now. Got 1 more to go, and I've had plenty of time with a clear mind to think of what I want to do. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna try to get a good steady job, and maybe once I get on my feet and have a good income, maybe re-enlist in school and go back to school. I'm doing GED courses in the Brevard County Jail right now. To hopefully I'll have enough time left to complete. If not, they've given me a place that I can go and complete my schooling and get my GED on the outside of the complex. I just want to get a good job, get back to the old ways, going fishing, being able, instead of spending money on drugs, spending money on going fishing, spending money on good food instead of going and buying drugs. I want to get all that back. I was raised in I guess you could say, an old Southern way, and I miss all that. I had it all growing up, going out on the weekends fishing, with my mom and my brothers. And I miss all that. I want all that back. So that's my plan.
Super. All right, just show of hands. How many of you all have children? How many of you have children? Okay, almost all of you. And this may be a particularly painful question for you to answer, but what do you tell your children? How do you explain you being in jail to your children?
Well, I don't. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old boy, both boys, and I don't tell them that because it's hard. You know what I mean? To let your child know that you're in jail, and they're always asking when Daddy coming home or Daddy where you at, and I have to tell them I'm in Florida on vacation. They're used to seeing me every day, and I love my kids, and I love being there for my kids. That's why I came to get this out the way. It's hard to let your child know that you know why Daddy isn't there, and they always wonder why Daddy ain't there because Daddy had to come here and handle his business. You know what I mean?
I have an 18-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. When I first started coming to jail, which was about 2008, used to tell him that I was an adult timeout, But my son, at that time, he knew better. My son is kind of pushed me away at this point, and because my parents have raised my children for the last 5 years. And, I've been in and out of jail and whatnot. So my daughter, she's the one that I'm having problems with. So she kind of accepts what I'm doing, and she just wants me to get home and get out and whatever. But it hurts the relationship with my son because I love them both I love them both to death, and I'd do anything for them. It's still at this point. But when you're in that addiction, you're not thinking of nobody but yourself.
Anybody else want to answer that question? For any of you that might have children who are either adult or juvenile age, but have any of your children been arrested?
My daughter's been arrested, and she's going through probation right now. She's only 16 years old, so. And she's been in JDC. I don't know. She did her 3-day or 7-day. She did her whatever that 20 whatever day, 21 day or whatever it is. So she is. I don't know. It's just she sees what her parents do, and she thinks that it doesn't matter what she does.
Okay, when and this is for any one of the chain gang, but when you guys are out on the street working as a team on work duty, how are you received by the public? Whether it's cars passing by, people that you encounter, what is their response to the chain gang itself? Get comments, people yell out the car windows as they're passing by, people yell at you. What do you hear when you're out working?
Well, when I'm out working, I see a lot of honking horns and as if they appreciate what we're doing. That's what I see.
That's pretty much it. You see, they honk horns, some stop and hang out the window with their cell phones and videotape us, and that's pretty much it. You know, I mean, we get a couple of good jobs here and there. You hear them, like when we're down on the off ramp, we're coming down, and they got a chance to slow down without disturbing traffic. They'll holler, you know, thank you guys, you're doing a good thing. We had one lady stop on 520 in particularly, and she said, I'm thankful that you guys are out here doing this. My son's seen you. He's 12 years old, and he's had this problem with school, and he's coming home acting like, you know, a little bit of a thug. And I explained to him that's where you end up, wearing chains on the side of the highway, picking up trash with 2 cops walking with you. You know, at any point in time, you know, she said that she was happy for what we're doing. You know, that he's kind of changed his attitude a little bit.
That is exactly what our chain gang is about. That is exactly the message that we're trying to portray out there, and that was the sheriff's message. So that's perfect. What I know many of you said that you have a substance abuse problem, drugs or alcohol. But those of you, how many of you have smoked pot, marijuana? Okay, every one of you have smoked marijuana. All right, how many of you smoked marijuana as the very first drug that you ever used? Okay, is that everybody? Is that every single member of the chain gang smoked marijuana? That was the first drug they ever used. Okay, and do you think that marijuana use led you to that next step, whether it was cocaine, heroin, PCP, whatever it was?
Absolutely. It is, as it's taught in school, a gateway drug. That's where it starts. You get that high, and if you don't have the mental strength or the moral support to get away from it, it's going to grab a hold of you, and you're going to chase a higher high. It'll snowball. It'll keep getting worse and worse. And once you get to one drug, you'll get as high as you possibly can on that one. You're lucky to live through it. You'll chase another high, a different kind of high, and it just keeps getting worse. But yes, it started at marijuana. Sometimes it's different from different people. You know, not everybody starts at marijuana, but a lot of it does start with drinking and marijuana, where your state of mind is deterred and you lose focus, and you just keep going and you do more drugs. Like I said, just chase a higher high. But yeah, it started with marijuana.
I know the gentleman next to you told us that he suffers with an addiction. Tell us how you started and tell us where you're at, what your progression was, and how you got there.
I started out drinking when I was, 15 or something like that. Occasionally, just with friends and buddies and whatnot. And then when I turned 18, I got into construction, got into smoking pot, drinking beer, and then after that, it was about 26, 27, started doing a little bit of cocaine. Then I got in. Then when I hit 35, got into that motorcycle wreck, got addicted to painkillers. So I've done pretty much everything that's around here anyways. But at this point, when you're addicted to painkillers, you're so sick when you want to come off of them that you just go out and you do something to get one, so you're not that sick anymore. Now that I'm in here and clean and mind's clean and I'm focused, I plan on getting out and doing the right thing with finding my job and whatnot. So I have good support, but that's when I'm clean. When I'm not, it's just a big snowball, and it's destructive. I'm very self-destructive.
Okay, and here's our final question, gentlemen. And any one of you that want to answer this question is fine. But what will you do differently when you are released from jail?
Well, me personally, I don't have anything different. I was beginning to get on the right track. I'm just here to clean up old mess. So, yeah.
Somebody else answer that question for us.
I plan on going back to school and getting my GED or high school diploma, either one. At this point, it would be great. And hopefully get on my feet and actually be an adult. I've been acting like a kid. Maybe start a family. Thank you. And just get my life started. I'm at that age to where I need to.
One more.
Well, go back to work and just get back to my life. I mean, 9 months. Ready to go back. Ready to get out of here.
Gentlemen, thank you. I know that it was difficult to answer some of these questions. We appreciate the candor and the honesty that you brought to us, and thank you very much.
I'm going to tell you, I had a chance to talk with the young men that are behind me, and well, not all of them are young. My buddy right here is a little bit up, but I had a chance to talk to them out in the foyer before they came in, and I asked, how many of you are nervous? And almost every one of them said they were nervous. It took a lot of courage to come up here and tell you about the mistakes they made. It took a lot of courage to volunteer to be a part of this group so that they can keep maybe one kid or 500 kids from following in their footsteps. And I think that deserves the recognition and the applause that they do. So please give these guys a great round of applause for what they did. They have their corrections deputies that are with them every day. They are out on the side of the road. Not only do they do what they do for us from a crime prevention perspective, but they also go out and beautify certain areas of our community. We get constant requests for them. They come into an area, it's trashed, it's got stuff everywhere. When they leave, it looks beautiful. It's really taken on a new perspective. And they not only take pride in that, I get text pictures all the time from where they cleaned up an area, and they're proud that they've gone out and done it. And by the way, they volunteer to be part of this team. They're not forced to do this. They volunteer to be part of this because they understand the importance of what we're doing. So, yes, ma'am.
I don't want to overstep, but I want to tell you I take care of teen felons, violent issues, and sexual offenders, and I live out right off Lifepoint. The first time I saw you guys marching, I had to pull over and have a cry because I have 9 in jail right now. But I will tell you that my boys, when we go by and we do have the opportunity to see you, several of them have changed what they're doing. I had one young man, and I'm pretty sure, and was pretty sure he was going to be in lockup most of his life. And he said, "What are they doing?" And I had read on you guys after I had my good cry, and he said, "I can't do that." I said, "But they've made a change." He says, "Why would they put themselves out there?" And I said, "Because of you. They're trying to make changes in their life." And you did. You did. And you are making. My boys get to see you, and I appreciate you, and I know it's hard. And you have saved one of mine already, and others have seen it. So I do want you guys to know I appreciate it, and I know it's hard because I'm tough, and I don't cry, and I have a real hard time because you have made a difference in some of my felons.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, guys. Well, I want to close out today and thank you. Thank you for being involved in your child's life to the point that you spent your Saturday with us here. Thank you for coming and being a part of this. This is the first time we've had a chance to put this presentation on. I think I can speak for our whole team when I say that we can't wait for January 21st to get to do this again with our team. So on behalf of our New Life Christian Church, Pastor Linkus and his team, behalf of our community relations team, and on behalf of the 1,400 men and women that work for the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, thank you for being here today. Thank you for letting us spend your Saturday with you and for being so supportive of it. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.